starting on time. How about that? Here I was afraid I was going to be late. My friends, welcome back to Tales of Praxis. I am your host, Aaron Suduko, the founder of WithTheTerribleFate.com, your online volunteer publication home for all of the most rigorous, involved, and passionate analyses of your favorite video game stories. We've been doing that for, I think it's going to be 8 years in November. So rapidly coming up on a decade of thinking about the storytelling of video games through an analytic and philosophical lens, which has been such a joy, not just for me, but really for everyone involved. And it's a pleasure to have all of you along for the latest addition to our journey through the world of studying video game storytelling, this kind of stream as live book club that we've been working on for the last few months. Tales of Praxis, for those of you who might not be familiar with it already, is a project that I've been running for With a Terrible Fate over the last about half a year, looking just at Bandai Namco's Tales JRPGs, but ultimately intending to look at and enjoy with you all and publish about all of them, which is quite an undertaking, but we've been having a fun time so far playing through some of them. Most recently, Tales of Berseria on the stream. I've played some others on the side. I've published on some of them, working on some more publications. Stay tuned because I'm going to give an update on that at the top of the stream here before we kick off Tales of Berseria again. Pottery Breaking, my friend, welcome back. It's great to see you again. It was too bad not to see you on Monday, and apologies to everyone. It was one of those days where, oh boy, talk about a 24-hour bug. They don't get any easier as you get older, I'll tell you, and that's part of the story too, because my birthday was Tuesday, and thankfully, it really was a 24-hour bug. It had cleared from my system by then, but Monday I was not in position to do much of anything besides focus on suffering and getting better. And if there's anything that JRPGs teach us, it's to take the time to do that. So now we are back in full swing, but we needed a sick day. Thank you, Pottery. So nice of you to wish me a happy birthday. I appreciate it. Certainly feeling the age that comes with birthdays, but I figured it was a nice thing to bring up too, because as I was thinking about ways to get us situated in the stream, going back into Tales of Berseria, I recognized that it is still this fun moment where for the first time in a while, even people who are not hardcore Tales fans are thinking about the Tales games, since Beyond the Dawn was recently announced, the surprise DLC that no one was expecting, but everyone quietly kind of wanted for Tales of Arise. And I actually have a kind of birthday age-themed anecdote, because people who have been watching the stream for a while, like Pottery, probably know that one of the things I've been doing, because I'm a collector and also I really like to mark and memorialize the analytical work that I do with games, is to build out my physical Tales collection as an homage to the Tales of Praxis work that I've been doing. And so a couple days ago, I got my Tales of Arise Collector's Edition in the mail, because I figured, man, I've been waiting on this. I don't want to wait anymore, because who knows if it'll get more popular and the prices will go up with Beyond the Dawn. Probably not, but you never know with these things. And so it's a beautiful edition. I love the way Bandai Namco does all of these, but I was appreciating it, I think yesterday, on my birthday, in fact. And one of the great things that Bamco always does so well is art books. And so they have this nice one for Tales of Arise. It's larger. It has really great quality illustrations, which all of them do, but it seems just a little more detailed to me than some of the other art books that I've seen. But one thing that was really interesting to me, this is one of the reasons that it's fun to look through this supplementary material, because there are some things where even if you could come to realize these things from the game, it's not always as obvious as you would expect it might be. And one of the things that has actually come up on Tales of Praxis since the very first stream that we did of Tales of Symphonia earlier this year is the question of characters' ages in JRPGs in general, but especially in the Tales games, because sometimes they'll offhandedly mention their age. In some games, it'll basically never come up, but the characters are, I think, all thoughtfully written with an eye to their age, and there is a fact of the matter answer in most, if not all, cases about how old they are. And so it was interesting to me because I had never really processed the relative age of the characters in Tales of Arise, even though I've played it several times. And I think, I was thinking back on the content of the game, I do think it's one of those things where probably just, if you listen to all of the skits and you made a timeline of historical events and when the previous crown contest had happened and how people are talking about their past relative to that, you could probably draw inferences that were pretty accurate, if not right on the money in terms of how old each character was. But I'll tell you, they don't make it obvious, and I didn't really do the work to do that. And I know that because I was looking at this book, and the answers actually surprised me, because I'll show you if I can get it on the camera here, and I imagine I can. First of all, just in terms of the illustrations I'm talking about. Wow, look at that, right? I mean, just, I love great art for great games, and this is a great example of, a game as a work of art that you can make a collector's book like this about it. But so, for the characters, they have these cutouts like Alphen, and it shows right alongside with his art and his name how old he is. He's 21. So that's I really like that they included that. And it was funny because he's the first one who shows up. And I started it with Alphen and I said, oh yeah, 21. That kind of intuitively makes sense because you play through the game and you feel like Alphen is still finding his place in the world, but he's not really that old yet, but he is older than the other people in the party. And of course, if you've played Tales of Arise, there's a certain sense in which he's quite a bit older than 21, but he's put into stasis. You don't have to count those years. He looks great for his age. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and relative to other main characters that you get in the Tales games and JRPGs, you're right, Pottery, just old as all hell. And maybe that's why they made his hair gray bordering on white, right? But some of these other characters, it was interesting to me. So the next one was Shion, and I saw, okay, Shion is 19. She's a couple years younger than Alphen. That seems to track. She's kind of hard-headed. She's forging her character, being reactive to others. But there are moments in the game where she definitely seems to learn things from Alphen and benefit from his maturity, which makes sense given their relationship. And also, you might imagine, given the slight, but especially at that age, I would say meaningful age difference between them. And then the next one we got to was Rinwell. It says Rinwell is 14 years old. And this was just such an interesting moment to me. And one of the reasons that I really wanted to highlight the ages in this game, because it was one of those things where, as my tone of voice might suggest, I was pretty surprised by that and kind of taken aback initially, because 14 struck me as a young age for someone in this party. But then the more I thought about it and stepped back and thought about the context of Tales of Arise and everything that Rinwell was going through, I was kind of laughing to myself, saying, oh, I found myself getting annoyed with Rinwell at various points in the game because she seemed kind of immature. So that would make sense if she was just this kid trying to figure out her place in the world as an orphan and didn't even really have the years on her yet to figure out how to contextualize that and formulate it into an identity. So one of those great things where kind of you recognized it on some intuitive level, but didn't know how to make sense of it because you hadn't processed it in your conscious mind. It was just fascinating to me to see that puzzle piece click into place as I saw that age. Law made more sense to me, especially relative to Rinwell. He's 16. That seems very on the money for me in terms of Law. A hothead trying to come to terms with the loss of his father, a couple years older than Rinwell, and yet 5 years younger than Alphen, to whom he certainly looks up as a mentor. So that made sense. But then the other thing that was really interesting was the duo of Kisara and Dohalim, the last two characters to whom you're introduced. Kisara, they represent in the book as 25. Which was surprising to me because, again, when I thought back about her representation as the mom of the party, I found myself thinking, oh, that kind of makes sense that she would be older. And so it's not just like she's the mom in a friend group. She really does feel some sort of maternal obligation to these kids she's guarding as a knight and as an older presence in the party. So that kind of gave me a better understanding and respect for Kisara as well. But then maybe the most interesting one to me, especially since in terms of birthdays, I just turned 29 from having been 28 last year, and the age which Presea actually was during the events of Tales of Symphonia, as she expresses at the end of the game. Our good friend, the Lord turned Danon supporter, Dohalim Ilkaris, was actually 28. And that honestly gave me so much more of an appreciation for his character, because I remember feeling the first time through the game, and this definitely echoed with me in my second playthrough of the game a few months ago, man, this guy, he seems really stuck in his own head and conceited and like he's on a different wavelength than all of these other characters. But seeing those ages in front of you, when you think about a 28-year-old who's, carrying on not just with foreigners from another planet who've been subjugated by him, but also just materially a 14-year-old, a 16-year-old, a 21-year-old, and a 25-year-old. Yeah, 28 is maybe still in absolute terms not that old, but this dude is ancient. I mean, he's coming to terms with basically his youth and ambitions being robbed from him because he was forced into this crown contest that he wanted no part in. But he really has, in terms of his relative age, kind of been robbed of that childhood. And now he is this kind of wistful adult in a childhood context. And so it got me rethinking even the dissonance that I experienced with Dohalim and saying, oh man, this kind of has me more sympathetic for the guy than resentful of him. And I hope that he is able to find his way in the world, given his position. So it was funny. You wouldn't think that simple numbers made such a difference, especially when, like I said, I feel like in most cases for these JRPGs, the relative age between characters in terms of who is younger than whom and who's older than whom is usually pretty clear. But boy, that really, it illuminated things in a way that I wasn't expecting, which was very cool to see. So food for thought, especially as we're going into the DLC, which is going to be a year later. So we can think of them not just at those ages, but those ages plus one. I think that's really going to change the context for me. I know, Pottery, we have kind of an interesting split on both sides, and even kind of at the median, with the main character being older than you would expect. And I guess you do typically get one character who is sort of the old man, Raven or otherwise. I forget how old Regal was in Tales of Symphonia. Maybe you remember that. I don't. But, the Regal type, the Raven type. But between Dohalim at 28 and Alphen at 21 and then Rinwell at 14, it's a really interesting and unusual distribution, which almost has, there you go, 33. That makes sense, knowing and having been inside the head of Regal for my most recent Tales of Symphonia study. So there you go. You typically have the old one, but it almost has me wanting to go back and even not just replay the game again, although I probably will before Beyond the Dawn comes out, but even just look at some of the campfire scenes and those little slice of life moments where they're hanging out with each other, because I feel like it's leading me to think about those dynamics and interplay between the different characters in different ways, which was cool. So there you go. Food for thought from a collector's edition as we jump back into Tales of Berseria. But before we get back into the meat of Tales of Berseria, just to think a little bit more about not just Tales of Arise, but also the coming article wing of the Tales of Praxis series. So regulars like Pottery will know that since the dawn of time, back when Maxwell breathed creation into being and Origin helped him out, I've been working on this Tales of Destiny and Tales of Vesperia study. It's coming together really well. I think you're going to like it. I was thinking about what to say about it on this stream. And I think the thing that's interesting to me, which in hindsight makes sense in terms of the manner in which this comparative study is proceeding, is it really is kind of like 3 analyses at the end of the day. And so I hope you like it and appreciate it as such, not only in terms of it being long, because I'm at about 3,500 words into the draft and I'm still living inside of Act 1 of these games, but also in the sense that it really is the spirit of the comparative analysis is such that I think it will offer a reading of Tales of Destiny and a reading of Tales of Vesperia, which are somewhat separable if you're interested in just looking at them that way. So, Pottery, with you being really dialed into Vesperia, but not having played Destiny, I think, you have a number of avenues into this if you're interested in reading it that way. But then also the third study, which really was the motivation for me approaching it in this way, was this idea of the whole being greater than the sum of its parts and the joint thesis of these two games when you play them in dialogue with one another, which you'll see it's kind of how the article is structured. It's not so much looking at one game and toto and then the other, but rather ping-ponging them off of one another, saying, let's look at Act 1 in Destiny. Now let's look at Act 1 in Vesperia, so that we can see them building collective and summed insights between the two of them as we proceed through the study. So I think it's going to be an adventure. It's not going to be anywhere near the adventure of what I did for Xenoblade Chronicles 3, so don't worry about that. But that should be a fun one, and I'm hoping to get through it and get it published. I think next week is realistic at this point, but I'll keep the stream posted for sure. And then I'm thinking, the next articles are not set in stone, but since we're hanging out on the stream and I want to give those who are engaging with the live book study the inside all access pass to it, so to speak. I do think, especially with the DLC for Tales of Arise coming out next, I'm going to try to write up what I lectured about with regard to Tales of Arise, the base story at PAX West, to make that more accessible to people. And then I'm thinking, I was mulling what we talked about in the weeds of Beyond the Dawn's trailer and where it seems to be going with the story on Friday. And I feel like it's going to be worthwhile to see if I can get something out that squarely focuses on Dawn of the New World, because I spoke a little bit around Dawn of the New World at the end of my study on Regal, but that was mostly with regard to seeing Dawn of the New World as an extension of certain themes in Tales of Symphonia and how it uses Regal to bring those themes to life in its new context. I'm thinking, the more I was weighing ideas of where they seem to be going with Nazimil and her perspective or maybe conflict with the idea of unifying these two worlds, the more I'm thinking it might be really interesting to do a shorter, more succinct, almost character study ahead of time in terms of the dichotomy between Emil and Ratatosk and how Dawn of the New World invites us to think about that. So this is something of an obvious point maybe for people who are really in the weeds on the Tales series, but it didn't occur to me when we were talking on Friday. I don't think I mentioned this. It occurred to me after the fact. While there are now going to be two Dawns in the series, they're very different Dawns, right? Dawn of the New World in Tales of Symphonia is very directly referencing, and I would say the game is representing what it takes for a new world to dawn, to emerge. Whereas Tales of Arise's DLC is squarely titled Beyond the Dawn, which makes me think that we might be on the right track in terms of what we talked about Friday, with them thinking about different stages or developmental phases of what establishing a new world order consists in between disparate peoples who maybe didn't even share the same world before. And so with that in mind, and especially since it seems like Nazimil and Emil/Ratatosk are both concerned with these ideas of how to adjudicate different identities or people who belong to different worlds and how they span those worlds, I think that might be a really nice conceptual apparatus to have at hand by the time Beyond the Dawn comes in November. So those are the things I'm thinking about. I will definitely keep everyone posted as we get further into all of that, but excited to have plenty of good reading materials to chat about with everyone. Always happy to chat more about the lecture as people watch that, if they want to discuss that too. But for the time being, I think that's quite enough of Tales games other than the one that we've been playing, as is the consistent theme of the stream. And we're going to jump back into Tales of Berseria. And oh my goodness, I had to deliberate and pick the topics outside of Berseria that I really felt were worthwhile to talk about this time around. Because boy, talk about leaving the story of this game at a climactic moment on Friday and then to be sick on Monday. I've been stewing over this. We really did. We left the party kind of having resolved the arc, but it's definitely still ongoing. They're in the Calix, the freaking EX dungeon from Tales of Zestiria. So there's going to be plenty more to unpack, and therefore I don't want to dwell too much on what happened on Friday. I think the one thing that I really did want to pick out, which we talked about on Friday, but just to reorient ourselves in this third act, and especially as it's been calling back to the dialectic of emotion versus reason, I wanted to reinforce what might end up being the same dialectic, maybe slightly different, this idea of the distinction between consistency and self-contradiction, especially with reference to the relationships through which we define our lives. All right, because especially with what we learned last time in terms of Artorias' history and how he and Laphicet developed this scheme to revive Innominat that they left Velvet intentionally out of the loop of, in terms to with the goal of using her as a tool for reviving Innominat, as has come to pass. It seems like when we compare something like Artorias' endgame of eliminating all negative human emotion with the button on the portion of the game that we played in the last stream where Velvet is literally grounded again when she's about to be consumed by Innominat by Laphicet and Eisen clinging on to him in that great scene in the Earth Pulse. But with her realizing, man, it's okay to have contradictory feelings towards people, and actually that can be part of how to adjudicate your relationships with them, and therefore, crucially, your own identity and what it is that you want to accomplish in the world, and how she kind of achieved that through the naming mechanism and this kind of linguistic practice of distinguishing Laphicet, her brother, from Innominat the monster, and similarly Arthur, her brother-in-law, from Artorius the monster, and saying, yes, I can have these happy, loving memories that defined me with these people, but also in terms of what they did to me and these other roles into which they've grown, I can have hatred for them and resent them and not forgive them, and be perfectly coherent as a human in virtue of that, despite being inconsistent in terms of the kinds of my attachment that I extend to those individuals. So I think that's really interesting to me in terms of asking, okay, how closely does that track the idea of emotion versus reason? Are we grasping onto something different that the game is saying, or are we just restating its core theme in different words? I don't know yet, but I have a feeling, especially after last time, that we're just going to be leaning further into those exact themes and questions and distinctions, especially in terms of relationships and family, as we proceed to the game's climax. So I think it's worth foregrounding, excuse me, words. It's a Wednesday evening. I'm still getting my footing, clearly. One thing that I called out too, just because reason and the ideas of logic are in the ether a while ago, and it might be worth bringing up, is there are certain interesting systems of logic in practices of Eastern philosophy, and some Western philosophers have brought them back into vogue in the Western tradition in the last decade to 15 years, of what's called dialethism, or the idea that there can be logical, consistent systems according to which mutually incompatible truths can both be asserted. So the idea that this is like a trite example, but something like a system according to which it can be true that it's raining and not raining. That's dialethism in a nutshell. And so I don't know that much more about it. It might be worth doing more research in light of Tales of Berseria, since that's my way into most philosophical issues these days through video games. But especially since the Abbey seems to be all about reason and logic, it's interesting to me to consider and apply philosophical thinking and saying, well, actually, if you look at the model of even how Velvet and her brood are just adjudicating their place in the world in terms of things like logic and reason, there are certainly models or frames of reference that you can impose that are very different than what the Abbey is propagating, and might render Velvet's group equally consistent in their own light and in their own frame of reference. So that's all I wanted to foreground. Excited to dig into the final act here. So let's do it. Back in the Calix, I think I made the joke with the title of this stream. Wouldn't it be funny, wouldn't it be sad, if here in the prequel to Zestiria we found poor Sophie and Jade as they are in Zestiria, just waiting to be saved, and in fact they can't be until Saray shows up how many years later. I hope for their sake, and frankly for the sake of Aldrint and whatever the world name in Graces is, that clearly shows I need to replay it, that they're off saving their own worlds, rather than being trapped in here.
You seem awfully chipper, Velvet.
I'm fine. And I guess I have you to thank as well.
Perhaps. But gratitude doesn't suit you. Now.
And wow, yes, Magilu. Oh my goodness, everything that happened with her at the end of last
See
stream.
your teeth.
A whole other
I made
kettle of
$100
fish.
bet that you'd break, remember? So, I need to see if you've broken anything. Let's start with those teeth. Help us out, kiddo.
All right. I just need to check our front teeth, right?
Front teeth, canines, whatever. Just get in there and take a good hard look.
You didn't mean that literally, did you? Why are you making me do the checking?
Acting the innocent maiden, are we? Well, I suppose that some say that showing the inside of your mouth can be more personal than being seen naked. What?
Is that a thing that people say?
Magilu, you're only making this even more awkward.
Come now, will you cooperate or not? We can't settle the bet until we know the tooth.
Fine.
The shocking
Let's check
tooth.
the ones in my left hand
Lila
first.
wants to know our location.
I believe Bienfu can assist with that.
Why me? Leave me out of this! Bien! She's squeezing me! Ouch! Those fangs hurt!
Nice to start on a note of levity after everything that happened last time.
The sparks returned to her eyes.
Oh, they took the words right out of my mouth.
Is showing the inside of your mouth really that embarrassing?
What? Keep your intrusive questions to yourself.
I guess there is perhaps some truth to that. This might be too much information, but since I'm, like I said, working on Tales of Vesperia
The size of the
and
Arctic Field.
and thinking through Repeat's character, I brush my dog's teeth every night to try to take care of her teeth, and it does seem like oddly intrusive, and she is often like demonstrably offended by that. So, and I guess I always have to see her naked because she doesn't wear clothes. So, maybe especially in the case of dogs.
At this place. Just what is the Abbey planning to use it for?
Whatever it is, they're trying hard to keep it hidden. Can't be anything good.
Oh, that's right. And Zaveid came back too. Man, so many threads coming together now. It will be fun because this is something I have no memory of in terms of how Berseria shakes out. How much we learn about the context and background behind the Calix, because I quite liked how they represented it in Zestiria in terms of this mysterious nexus of the worlds that had something to do with the era of the gods and gave us all that room to speculate as we did in terms of how it might serve as an intersection of player experience and sort of a lore-grounded way to pull in characters from other games, as it does with Jade and Sophie. So part of me hopes that they won't explain it further, but part of me also trusts that if they do go on to do that, it'll be in a way that sheds interesting light on our reading of it in Zestiria. And obviously, if they put it in a new context in Berseria, that doesn't take away or invalidate our feelings about it in the context of Zestiria.
I'll end this quickly.
So I haven't asked a general interest question about how we think about video games on the stream in a while, but I had a lot of fun with that back when I was preparing the PAX West panel, and everyone who came through got to be grilled about how they would define a JRPG. And right now, we every now and then on With a Terrible Fate, we have interns in association with some undergraduate programs, which is always really fun and a pleasure. And so I'm starting work with one of those interns. And his initial work has gotten me thinking again about this issue that a lot of people in gaming think about in terms of what the best analysis is of like how it is that we as players relate to avatars in video games. Because I think the intuitive sense, and one thing that draws a lot of people to video games in the first place, is the idea that, oh, you know, you have agency in the game, you're inputting controls, it's very easy to imagine yourself as the avatar and feel like you're in this fictional world. And that's something that, for me personally, I do think I was one of those people who was drawn to video games, not only for that reason, but for that reason among others as a kid. But then as I got older and I've played more games and thought more about like the literary structure of games, I feel like I've found myself distanced from that idea. And so I wanted to ask, and as more people come through the stream, I'm going to go on an adventure of similarly grilling them, but especially with JRPGs and JRPGs of the sort that we see in the Tales games, since that's what we're working through for Tales of Praxis. Do you find yourself like imagining that you are one of the characters, whether that's the main character through which the game is focalized or someone else in the party? Or do you see it more detached as a kind of novel where, yeah, you're making decisions, but these characters are animated and live lives on their own that are separate from your experiences as a player? Or do you think about your relationship with the characters and party members in a totally different way?
Hey, who was that kid anyway?
He and I used to be tethered to an exorcist named Lady Teresa. He was number 1.
That's right, we ran
I
into
was
number 1
2.
as well.
Oh, a friend of yours then. So he went feral after that Teresa lady fell.
Yeah. I found Velvet and the others, but he probably had nowhere to go.
A stray Moloch stripped of his free will won't go much further than a demon's belly. Anyway, seems like the only people I run into these days are kids. I'm more in the market for an unattached woman with a pretty face.
Sorry?
I'm just fooling around. Grow a sense of humor, kid. Anyway, relax. I'll keep an eye on him until he's in command of himself again, all right? Just one more reason to bring the Abbey down.
Right. Thanks, Zaveid.
It's interesting to me. I'll have to put on my never-ending list of ideas of studies for Tales of Praxis a character study of Zaveid, because in the first place, like we've talked about, he's a very interesting character to see in these pretty different but continuous lights across the two games, Tales of Zestiria and Tales of Berseria. But then in addition to that, there's something really interesting to me, to the sense that, well, he's, to me at least, such a really compelling and interesting character and kind of a force of nature, no pun intended, in terms of how he sees the world and engages with it. You only get these little windows into him. Like, even in Tales of Zestiria, he's never really a bona fide party member in his own right. He goes from being this seraph who works alone and has his own agenda to then taking up Dezel's, wow, I had to reach for that name, taking up Dezel's mantle and literally putting on his hat after Dezel dies in order to continue Dezel's legacy. But he really is kind of like a secondary, or second string, you might say, character who's put in after Dezel is gone. And then similarly in Berseria, yeah, he's here, yeah, he's a huge force in the narrative, but he's effectively been relegated to the role of escort character at best, excuse me. Even now, like, because like we talked about earlier in the playthrough, he doesn't buy into the party's ethos of killing in order to achieve their ends. He won't fight with them. Like, he's present, he's supporting them, he's helping to take care of number one, like he just said to Laphicet. But he's still kind of just waiting in the wings. And so I think that idea of a character who shows up in multiple games in different interesting contexts, but is always kind of just outside the main focus of the story, is really interesting, and the kind of unusual take on a party member that I wouldn't really expect any JRPG series other than Tales to explore.
Hey, Laphicet, can you think of a good name for the kid?
You're giving number one a name?
Yeah. He says he can't remember his true name, and calling him by a number seems mean, you know?
Yeah. I was really happy when Velvet gave me my name.
Hey, I've got this. How about Hajime? It means the first, and he's number one, right?
That is a pretty cool name.
Why not just go with Ichiro?
No way. It was Shigure's childhood name.
Oh,
Why should that matter
baggage.
to us?
It should be softer. How about Ichi? Or maybe something like Numby?
Numby.
Numby? Where'd that one come from? It's like number, but, more
Arguably
cute.
the dumbest
Let's
suggestion
just
for a
forget
name
that
I've
one.
ever heard.
I don't think we should reference his old number at all.
How about Bob?
Is that just because of his hairstyle? That's really reaching.
Actually, I kind of like it. If it's too plain, how about Bobby? That isn't bad. Right? Then number one is hereby renamed.
Stop it, you two! You don't understand it at all! A boy doesn't want a name that sounds cute!
You don't think so? That was quite an outburst.
The kid has a point. You need something with more panache.
How about Silva?
Silva?
His hair and pendant are both silver.
I like it. It's got a certain mystique about it.
Silva! Yeah, it sounds cool!
Well, if his old buddy Laphicet approves, then Silva it is. Well done, first mate.
Praise from you is wasted on me.
Then consider it praise from Silva instead. Right, time to go give him the good news. Hey, the Moloch formerly known as number one, you've got a new name.
It's a fucking symbol.
Maybe we should
I
have
can't pronounce it.
naming you too.
That's all right. You need to steer your own ship. Right, Eisen? You're the one who taught me that.
You know just what to say, don't you? Moloch, formerly known as Number 2.
My name is X now. I'm the preeminent social network. This game has so many interesting things to say about names. Like that's another analysis we could easily do, and we've talked about it before, but it's funny because I found myself sitting here thinking, man, it doesn't seem that fair or empowering to me for them to pick a new name for this kid just based on his physical attributes, like the fact that his accessories happen to be silver. But then I found myself thinking, well, the whole problem is that he doesn't have a personality in a sense of his identity, and he needs a starting point. So it's almost like there's nothing more intrinsic than his incidental characteristics to point to in choosing a name for him, or anything like that.
You'll be rust on my blade.
And then that got me thinking back to, how it was that Velvet named the Malik formerly known as Number 2, Laphicet, right? Because as grateful as he was for that name and how it empowered him to come into his own, it was very much because he reminded him of her brother. And so she was kind of projecting this identity that was not his own onto him for the sake of giving him his own identity. So as much as we were talking about the sort of the more vengeful or negative side of self-contradiction at the end of last stream in terms of Velvet drawing power from the negative emotions and being able to resent and resist Innominat and Artorias, I think it also works in a kind of positive direction where you have a similar sort of contradiction where in giving someone like Laphicet or now Silva a name, you are kind of doing something that is egoistic and oriented towards the namer because they're the one in control of how that name gets chosen and how it relates to the world outside of the individual who is named. But then also, as much as that is like egoistically directed towards the namer, it's this act that thereby gives the individual who is named a sense of autonomy and enough identity to go on and formulate their own sense of self and ultimately break away from whatever context gave them that name in the first place, like Laphicet did when he finally stood up to Velvet on the boat and said, "I'm not your brother," and Velvet said, "Let's call you Fee instead." So I think that's a really empowering way of exploring the same kinds of self-contradictory nature that we've already seen in so many other aspects of the story, especially in this third act.
Magilu, what were you up to while we were lost in the Earth Pulse?
I was ringing the bell. The rift was open the whole time. Couldn't you hear me?
I don't remember hearing any bells.
She was fighting with Lord Melchior. She really gave it her all.
Bienfu, don't give him the wrong impression.
But you endured so much. It was so moving.
Yes, I did endure. It was so hard not to laugh.
Did the old man tell you a joke or something?
It was a staring contest, and oh, the faces that old man can make. I kept picturing him as a young man, but with that same wrinkled face, and it was so hard not to crack. I needed to keep myself in check. My desire to laugh was only broken by the ringing of the bell. Clang, crash, what a thrill!
Wait, was that the only thing that broke Magilu?
Are you asking if he broke my heart? Like I'm fishing for sympathy?
That's not what I meant at all.
You stood watch over the Earth Pulse rift for us.
I didn't say that. Stop trying to give me a participation medal.
Just take it. After all, you don't care either way, right?
True that.
Yeah, that was the other great thing with the whole study of Magilu with which we concluded the last stream. I had forgotten actually that the substance of her bet with Velvet was that Velvet would break before it was all over. And so for Velvet to have kind of been under that challenge by Magilu, and then for Magilu on the other hand to ultimately stand up for Velvet and the party by enduring Melchior magically breaking and reforming her heart countless times in this sort of metaphysical torment was such a an interesting and unexpectedly heartwarming portrait of Magulu, I felt. So it hasn't been explicated yet, unless I've missed it, but Magulu identified herself last time as she was standing up to Melchior as Magulu Maven, and we know from earlier in the stream, Padre, I think it was actually you who caught this, that Melchior's last name is also Maven, so I think the implication is that not only is Melchior her mentor from whom she learned magic, but also her dad, which makes me all the more interested in their relationship and all the strife that has evidently come with it, especially for how little we know about it at this point.
Captured, just like the Therians.
I wonder how much the game will or won't go into more detail about that.
An art connects this place to the Earth Pulse. That's probably why we were taken here.
Earth Pulse. So it's got something to do with Innominat?
That would be the obvious conclusion.
I don't get it. Explain. Small words.
Very well. You're part of all this, too.
Velvet.
I'm fine now. I promise.
All right.
I see. You found out Innominat's true identity. So, now that you know, can you still fight him?
It's only given me more reason to kill him. And the shepherd.
You're one ice-cold girl.
There's still one thing bothering me. Innominat needs to eat malevolence to awaken. Once he does, he'll use his power to suppress negative emotions. But when humans can't create any more malevolence, what will happen to Innominat?
He'll run out of things to eat. And maybe die?
Wouldn't he just go back to sleep?
But if he does, then his power will fade and humanity will start creating malevolence again, right?
In order for Innominat to eternally suppress negative emotions...
He needs an infinite, powerful source of malevolence to feed off of. For example, that produced by an immortal dragon.
Which would make this place a sort of dragon farm, created so he could control humanity forever.
You can't be serious. Just speculation, but it all makes sense.
They can't think of Malakim as anything but tools.
Just how much will they sacrifice for their ideal world of tranquility?
We don't dare free it. It'd be too dangerous.
I know. Damn the Abbey and their twisted morality.
So there you go. We got the origin story of the Calix after all, in terms of perpetuating Innominat's capacity to suppress negative emotion, which does kind of, like I said, it doesn't take away of the reading we were doing in Zestiria, but does put it in another direction. I was trying to look up the etymology of Calix just to see if there was anything else that was illuminating there. It seems like the most apt definition is the idea of a cup-like cavity or structure, which I suppose is what we get here with all of these interlocked platforms that spiral downwards. That is kind of like a cup-like structure used to contain and channel dragons, I guess. Which, of course, would tie into what I think, if I remember right, Grail was calling out all the way back in Zestiria, because if you remember, back when you show up on the Hexen Isle, which links to the Calix, there's a dragon skeleton there, and Zaveid seems to know a little bit more about it than he's letting on to the shepherd and the rest of the party, and this would be the reason why.
What was it that I believed in all that time? The image I'd built of the Abbey is crumbling from the bottom up.
Please cheer up, Madame Eleanor. You'll make me depressed, too. Is this about the dragon farm?
Yes. I strongly doubt even the Abbey has the power to manipulate dragons so freely. Then that dragon...
Wasn't a dragon before it came here?
That's the natural assumption. They probably brought the Moloch here as a captive, then turned him into a dragon.
Just like Melchior did, eh? Is there no line they won't cross?
I don't know what to say.
It's not your fault, Madame Eleanor.
But spawning dragons in addition to Therians. You think they'll figure out a way to make humans too?
Yes. Wait, that's awful. I can't believe you went there.
So that's interesting. I'm trying to connect what they're saying about like kidnapping Malakim to turn into dragons to channel for Innominat's energy to the way we experience the Calix as an EX dungeon in Tales of Zestiria. And I think maybe the interesting connection is if the Calix is this sort of interesting Earth Pulse point that because of the relics from the era of the gods, or simply because it has that special kind of extra dimensional energy, is able to draw in people and entities from other worlds, as we see happens with Jade and Sophie, then maybe the idea was that if this is that kind of natural point on the world, the Abbey was trying to leverage that to just like create this Bermuda Triangle sort of prison that sucks in powerful beings from all sorts of nearby worlds in order to cultivate their malevolence and transform them into dragons to just perpetually sustain Innominat. There could be an interesting thought there, I think, in terms of leeching off of the abilities and potential of other worlds, especially with all of the other overlap we see between especially Tales of Berseria and its world and all of the other relics or nearby relic adjacent objects that you can find in reference to other worlds in the expeditions. Oh, which reminds me, I wonder whether I just lost the feedback loop of sending out expeditions because we haven't had one in a while. Yeah, I just totally dropped the ball. Man, every 3 or 4 streams, one just slips by me. It must be when the story really picks up and I stop paying attention to it.
Scout ship setting sail.
Fix that right up.
I'm ready for this.
If you want to live, get out of my way.
I'm ready for this.
You two are so cool.
Don't become like me.
Oh, I don't think I'd seen that one before.
Imitate us, please.
I loved that one. That made me my favorite post-battle scene so far in the game.
Hey, is everyone all right?
Hope we have something useful waiting for us in this chest. I feel like half the ones we've opened we haven't been able to take. A soul bottle! Alright. That was worth the detour.
You'll be rust on my blade.
And down the cup-like structure we go.
Velvet,
What is it?
I was once your sister's child, right? Then my father is...
Look, you were reborn, right?
Yeah.
Honestly, I really don't know anything about how being reborn works. But to me, what you see, what you hear, and what you feel, that's what's important. Whoever we used to be in another life, I'm me now, and you're you. That's all there is to it.
Velvet.
That's true. Eisen said that not all Malakim are humans who have been reborn, right?
Does that mean they could be reincarnations of birds or fish or beasts?
That's not true. So, if a boy was a dog in a past life, that wouldn't make him part of the dog's family now.
Yeah. I'm me, I guess.
But you're Velvet's cute little pup, aren't ya?
Moggy-Loo.
Be careful. I bite.
Oh, have mercy! I take it all back, just don't bite me!
Rebirth is like the Earth in Historia. You're simply built on a larger foundation. But that's not special. Everyone's lives are founded on the past.
So, I'm just me.
Yep. You're you, and no one else. You're Fee.
I know I've talked about this before, and it was one of the things that I talked about at PAX West too, but the more I go back through all of these games for Tales of Praxis, the more I really do feel like so many of them, if not all of them in one sense or another, are really about coming to understand how to relate one's present and future course of actions with things that have happened not only in your personal past, but also in the broader history of the world, and what past events brought the present into being. And I think that really heartwarming skit that we just saw with the idea of what rebirth means strikes me as a pretty interesting counterpoint to what we saw in Tales of Zestiria, right? Because in Zestiria, it was still very much about Lila encouraging Saray and Mikleo and everyone to come to understand the meaning of their own journey and place in the world, and really only revealing to Saray and Mikleo their connection to the world's history after they'd already found their internal resolve in order to locate their current understanding within sort of the destiny or world events into which they've been born. So that was still about finding your place in the present, but very much with this understanding that there is also a historical lineage that it's incumbent upon you to contribute to in one way or another, and it's the one way or another that is left up to you as the actor in the present. Whereas here, this does seem to me to be one of the cases where the prequel is antithetical to the predecessor, Zestiria, saying, yeah, you know, like Eisen said, I mean, he said it quite beautifully, this idea that rebirth means that you're built on a larger foundation, but at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. Like, of course we all came from somewhere, but we're able to make whatever we want out of it, and even come to terms with or understand our past as much or as little as we want. Which is interesting, because actually, of all the kind of mind-blowing revelations that we saw in the last stream, I would say that Lathicet's identity as Artorius's unborn deceased child with Celica was one of the things that I actually didn't even remember until they brought it up in that last skit. And perhaps part of the reason is just that the game treats the past in a different way than Zestiria, where it doesn't matter as much to informing present actions. Because, I mean, it was such a twist with the Earth in Historia for Saray and Mikleo to discover their connection with the past. Like, that is a memorable centerpiece moment, and I don't think it's a coincidence that the same kind of revelation of one's previous incarnation is downplayed and kind of explicitly shrugged off by the characters, as we just saw in Berseria.
Hey, first mate. Who was that horned demon with the old man?
I don't know.
I thought I felt something different about him. If only for just a moment. You feel it too?
I said I don't know.
I see. You're impossible, you know that?
We've come across him before. but we never really fought him. My guess is Melchior is controlling him with some sort of illusion.
I see. Then it's probably good you didn't fight. A straight battle against him wouldn't be an easy thing.
How do you know that?
Intuition. I have a nose for these things. There's something fishy about him.
That scar on his face. Couldn't be.
What's the matter?
I think he could.
You've gone pale.
Think he could.
It's nothing. We need to get out of here. Let's go.
We made it!
I came here by ship. It's anchored by the southeast beach.
Oh, and that makes sense with... I'm putting together slowly in my my Wednesday evening addled mind the connection between Hexen Isle and the Calix and then Artorias' throne and Innominat. Because remember, back in Zestiria, to access the Hexen Isle, you had to wait until you defeated Heldolf, and then the portal to it was at the pinnacle of Artorias' throne, which we know even from earlier events in Berseria was also where Artorias and the Abbey worked to channel and invoke Innominat. So it would make sense then that if the Hexen Isle is designed to serve as this sort of infinitely renewable resource of malevolence to continue to invoke Innominat in perpetuity, that it would be linked directly to the throne, like the seat of power of Artorias and Innominat himself. Yeah, it's all connected. Is there any equipment we can upgrade that's already equipped? That's roughly the amount of enhancement I'm willing to invest in at the moment. Valkyrie! Alright, excellent. Awesome. I think that was a worthy stop.
You better be ready.
Enticing Glamour! What a name for an enemy. God, Zestiria and Berseria alike. Fairies, just the worst kinds of enemies. I don't think it's rocket science either. I think, as I see it, it's just that they always appear in groups, they have small hitboxes, and they're always all casting spells. Spells with pretty wide AoEs, too.
It was a close one, but I am the victor.
Wise and learned Hellgate. Hey, Pizzicato 5. Hello again, my friend. Thank you for the happy birthday wishes. It gave me an excuse to going a whole discourse about the age of JRPG characters. So if that's the only gift I got, it was worth it. No, I'm just kidding. I'm feeling old, feeling grateful for all of the great video game studies we continue to embark on together. So thank you for showing up. Thank you for the well wishes. You make it worth the ride. Excited to see what the next year holds for With a Terrible Fate as much as anything. God knows we still got plenty of tales ahead of us. And lots of other good stuff in the hopper too, so stay tuned.
What happened?
We used to play tag all the time.
Ah!
I won't let you get away, Velvet.
Innominat! I'm scared!
Stop it! You're turning him into a dragon!
That was the whole reason I took him from Teresa. It's just another necessary
Oh, no.
sacrifice for peace.
Oh, I think this is the dragon skeleton we saw in Zestiria, you guys. Yep, this is exactly where it showed up on Hexen Isle. I spoke too soon with that other dragon. Oh, Jesus. Don't know why I didn't see that coming.
Innominat, you monster!
Innominat to the front of us, a dragon to the back of us. Reaper's curse doesn't begin to describe
Seriously.
it. What a shame. Is that despair I sense?
Not on your life.
It'll take more than this to make your big sister break.
The more you resist, the more you'll suffer.
Velvet, let me punish this rotten little delinquent.
You're just a Malak. You don't stand a chance.
I'm not just any Moloch. And I'm sick of murdering scum like you.
My man. Oh my god! The triple shot! Wow. Absolutely awesome.
This is officially too damn much.
We'll be fine. Take them out one by one!
Wow. Oh, what a scene.
Save your regrets for later. We're dead if we don't focus.
Bringing him a swift death would be a mercy.
The special sadness and foreshadowing to having Eisen face off against a dragon too. There is something to me that's almost like a weird combination of hilarious and very seriously scary about just the unexpected nature of this all-powerful evil god randomly and unexpectedly showing up in a nondescript area like the Hexen Isle. Like to be wandering in this green pasture and suddenly turn the corner and there's Innominat just hanging out, getting ready to wreak havoc. Like, it's a very different context than, you know, taking all of the effort to approach this grandstanding final dungeon of Artorias' throne and fight some ultimate being there. Context makes all the difference, doesn't it? I was thinking, I don't know how much you can pull on this thread either, but there's something interesting to me thinking about the contrast between Laphicet, Velvet's brother, and then Innominat, this monstrous divine entity that's born from Laphicet. Because remember, Laphicet, Velvet's brother, was also basically bedridden, right? Stricken with the 12-year sickness. And so there's this sense in which he was very pure, but also lacked a lot of personal agency in his ability to impact and impress himself upon the world outside of himself. Whereas in Innominat, that script is kind of flipped, right? Like he seems to be totally out of touch with the moral center of the world, where Laphicet seemed to have a decent handle on that. But he has almost what might be described as a surplus of agency, where the entire world is an extension of his body. He can be anywhere he wants to. He can snap his fingers and turn a Malik into a dragon like we just saw. So interesting to think about the contrast in their natures along that dimension.
He's healing himself. Stop that, dummy!
Bring him down in one push.
I told you you would suffer.
Zaveid.
I'll hold off Innominat. Everyone else, take out that dragon.
There's no way you can face him alone. At least let me assist you.
This isn't an order. It's strategy.
I'm counting on you, Fee.
Wow.
For
The
something
bravery
that's
of a
mere
kid.
part of me, you're awfully uppity.
I am the Mala Mafiset. I am my own master.
I miscalculated before. I won't hold back this time.
And neither will we!
And it's on.
Nothing's changed. We're still in the same bind.
Everything's changed. He's trying to become someone new.
It's a gamble. I'm in. Me too.
You stay out of this. Your dumb coin always lands on Skull.
And you'll just have to flip it over.
Not happening. I'm going for the jackpot here.
I do love that. That's such a JRPG mantra. Yeah, the battle conditions may not have changed, but one of our characters just stepped up and enacted some radical personal development, and that's all it takes to make the difference between victory and failure.
You saved me!
I really have to remap this girl's kit. I don't understand why all roads lead to Swallow Dance. That is not my intention.
I'll finish this.
Not the days. Anything but the days. Dragon dive versus a dragon? Guess I gotta see.
Rise! Arise! Ascending angel!
God, they don't call dragons the ultimate endpoint of malevolence for nothing. These things are reliably tanks in terms of these battles. I want there to be souls on the battlefield. Where are my souls? Give it to me, your draconic soul. God, he loves staggering us, doesn't he? Jesus. Some brutal range. Oh shoot! Wow, the sun has really decided to mess with my entire green screen this time. I'm gonna go see if I can pull the blinds. Ha! Please hold. Oh my goodness, I don't know what the appropriate JRPG metaphor is for sunlight literally bleeding through the background of the world, but I looked over at the video playback and it looked more transcendental than it ought to have looked at this point in the game.
No, it's not. You talk big, but you're struggling even to protect yourself. If you apologize now, I'll make sure it doesn't hurt when I devour you.
No way I'm apologizing. Not to some jerk who doesn't understand how Velvet feels.
Oh, that's hilarious, Pottery. Yeah, I forgot that she also voices Jessie. Man.
She's my sister.
Yeah, it's a Lindbeck overload for you.
I know everything, but I won't tell you.
Good voice actress to OD on, though, if you got to pick one. She does some great work.
If I devour you, we'll be one again anyway. The compass.
Oh, Jesus.
She isn't yours.
Wow. What a great denouement for that symbol. All the way from the beginning of the game to here.
Velvet is velvet.
And you're just a fragment of me!
Guys, look out!
Stupid kid!
So that was your strategy.
Hey, give us more warning! You almost roasted us alive!
You've really done it now. I'll turn you into a dragon. See who's What's going on? The malevolence burned away?
Wow.
We're leaving.
That was
Hurry.
awesome. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt the conclusion of that truly awesome scene, but your comment reminded me, Pottery. I got more miffed than I should have because, like I said, I've obviously been following everything with Beyond the Dawn. And so they announced the pre-order packages for it. And I was miffed because there was no physical edition. So you can, it's left as an exercise to the reader all of the reasons that I'm miffed by that. Everyone should know all the reasons I'd be frustrated by that at this point. But then also, they added new DLC costumes, as they often do, for the characters in Arise that were callbacks to previous games. And Shion actually has one from Tales of Berseria, but it's Velvet's costume. And so I get that in terms of it being an interesting fashion choice for Shion, I guess. But when you have the continuity of Erica Lindbeck already. I just found myself shaking my fist at my computer saying, "Man, why couldn't you just have given her a Magilu costume? That would have made so much more sense and been so much cooler in my head for that continuity of voice actress." But it's going to be some cool costumes anyway. Nice set. Well, you know, Potter, you have to kind of squint to see it, but I think if you look at the overall set of costumes, it's largely focused on, I think largely just focused on bringing in and invoking other main characters. Like you have Jude's costume, you have the protagonist from Tales of Zestiria 2, whose name isn't ingrained in my head yet because I haven't played any of it. You have Velvet. One that's an odd one out is I think Kisara has Flynn's outfit, and he's not quite the main character in Vesperia, but as we've talked about, it doesn't quite have a main character anyway, and that continuity of them both being knights makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I think they're leaning more into just recalling like previous main characters. Although I don't know, I think Dohalim's is Jade, which makes more sense in terms of their DNA and personalities being similar. And then I think Rinwell has a Rita costume, which is cool, you know, calling back to another mage with some similar DNA as well. So maybe they did just want to shoehorn a Velvet callback in there. I'm kind of talking myself out of thinking that it makes sense the more that I'm thinking about this. Yeah, because a lot of the rest of them do make sense, like the ones you were talking about, Pottery. Well, there you go. We don't need to belabor the point now, but just to solidify it in our heads as we go forward. I know I lost my mind at the breaking of the compass, but man, how cool for Fee to use that as a defensive mechanism and be willing to sacrifice the compass as a demonstration of the fact that he is finally fully actualized as an individual and no longer needs this external compass because he has fully internalized that direction that has been given to him and imparted by everyone so that he can now make his own decisions. And how perfect for it to be the thing that totally disarms and disorients Innominat because it demonstrates to him that for all his planning and machinations with Artorias, he has in fact lost his way as opposed to finding anything substantive with which to orient himself within the world. And they say all of that in just a beautiful single shot of that compass breaking. The symbolic payoff for that. It's not the only one in the game, and I don't think it's the only one we're going to see in the remainder of the third act, but I love that one. Yeah, no, you're right, Pottery, and you must have been typing that as I was coming around to the same point, because I think we arrived at the same conclusion.
They got away.
Okay. We're not going to spend the rest of the stream talking about outfits, but I'll say this, thinking about it for a moment more. I do feel like it's not as obvious a thematic continuity, maybe, but I think you don't have to be that charitable to see some similar DNA between Shion and Velvet as well, because as I'm thinking about it for a second more, there is a sense, like we've been talking about throughout Tales of Berseria, Velvet finds herself trapped and traps herself in many different kinds of prisons and cages, literally and emotionally, and in terms of how she conceives of herself. Shion does something very similar in terms of how she relates to the society around her, her own lineage, her thorns. And so even though Shion is more healed and actualized through a love story, whereas Velvet is more through her chosen family and her changing understanding of her own past and how that informs her present. I think their sense of imprisonment feels more similar to me than I imagined at first glance, the more I'm thinking about it. So I don't think it's just fan service for Velvet. Let's put it that way. I think there's more to recommend it than that. Oh, I love that you called out the Jude Law joke, because that actually totally flew right over my head. But now I'm never going to be able to unhear that, so thank you for that, Pottery.
A silver flame. A strange art that Malak used.
Did you forget that you have the power to digest malevolence? That thing may be a fragment, but it's still part of you.
But the dragon attacked me. If it hadn't disrupted my concentration like that, I never would have let my fragment lay a finger on me.
So long as you learn from your mistake, such a ruse won't work a second time. After all, Malakim are mere servants of the Empyreans. As long as we stay wary, they pose no threat to our ideal world.
Your awakening is nearly complete. None within your domain can stand against you without the power of the 4 elemental Empyreans. And they are fast asleep, far beneath the earth pulses.
I'm going after them.
No, not now. We need to make preparations for the ceremony of suppression.
We'll send
That
this
doesn't
one
sound
after
good.
them instead.
A demon? Will he be reliable?
True, he can be hard to control. Even after he succumbed to demonhood, he withstood my illusions for 7 days and nights. Even now, he resists on an instinctual level. However, he used to be known as the most fearsome pirate in all the seas. His strength is equal to...
Aye, if only he could be freed.
Capture the Therian Velvet. Do whatever you have to, as long as you keep her alive.
Wait. First,
kill him. Kill Laphicet. Before my sister's eyes. He's the only thing keeping her from falling to despair. It's true. Demon or not, he still possesses an odd sort of pride. I'll have to relieve him of such a meaningless burden.
Jesus. I don't know whether I'm reading too much into it, but I'll read a little more into it. We talked last time about how Innominat seems to strike more than a few similar notes with Mythos in terms of the age of lifeless beings and the suppression of negative emotions and the manipulation of others and a kind of quiet, holier-than-thou sadism. And even the character models and the voice acting, the more I'm listening and spending time with him, seem very similar. And so to push that a bridge further, I think one of the things that even just seeing that whole gang of villains hanging out seems very gross to me, especially in an intertextual context with Tales of Symphonia, is Mythos, monster that he is, unsympathetic as he is someone who had an original wound. You know, the world was not kind to him and his sister, and he just completely overreacted, took the wrong lessons from her, and spiraled out of control of his own accord. So say what you will about Mythos, but at least you can kind of trace the origins of him to aspects of the world. Here it almost seems like a group of people came together and decided, what if we co-opt all of the world's resources in order to give birth to a being like Mythos, which for all of the scheming and deliberation behind it strikes me as a million times worse seen in a certain light. So, interesting to think about which is the grosser, Innominat or Mythos.
Made for good training, at least. We fought an Armatus, an Empyrean, and a dragon. It's a miracle we're still alive.
It's all thanks to Fee.
He's still asleep. He must have used all his physical and mental strength. A fire that burns away malevolence. That's quite the talent he's got there.
Is it because he's part of Innominat?
Sure could be. In one sense, that's a lucky break for us. But on the other hand... Anyway, I lost that bet, and I was so sure I was gonna win, too.
Awful lot of drama you're making over 100 gold.
Don't you dare laugh off 100 gold! One with no respect for gold will be by 20 lions mauled. Everyone knows that.
Right. Anyway, what do we do next?
Nothing's changed. We seal Innominat away and kill Artorius. Even if Innominat has awakened, There must be a way to seal him back again.
One would
Our
hope.
best lead is still Grimoire's ancient book. We should meet up with Benwick and the others.
Are you sure you want to stay with us?
I don't know if it's the right choice or not, but I refuse to believe Lord Artorias is right. That sacrifices are inevitable bumps on the road to a better world. That's why I'll do what I believe is right, and fight him. Even if I'm wrong, I won't have any regrets.
Do you have any idea how frustrating you are?
You're one to talk.
Eisen, get in touch with Benwick and the others.
That demon. It had to have been.
Eisen?
I think we need a break more than anything. That was a long stretch of battle.
Seconded. Besides, the boy and Zaveid aren't waking up anytime soon.
Let's find a place to sleep for tonight. Eleanor, look after Laphicet.
Maybe you ought to carry him. He did all this for you.
Please.
Very well.
It's interesting
You can
to...
at least
Oh, the
carry
compass
poor
is
kid.
gone.
Damn, you're cold.
No, quite the opposite.
I was going to say, it's interesting to see how Eisen is processing and coming to terms with Aifread, because at this point in the story, right, we as players who have been paying attention, it's obvious to us that that demon is Aifread, even though Melchior didn't come right out and say, yeah, I demonized Aifread and now he's my bitch. But so for us to know that, and for it to be clear to probably the majority of everyone who has familiarity with Aifread, like Zaveid, but to see Eisen in these skits saying, no, that demon couldn't be, it's not possible. Almost like you would see in another JRPG where characters were hinting at something that players wouldn't reasonably know yet or have enough evidence to infer from the story. It's an interesting way, I think, of showing how, even though it's something that Eisen probably does know and understand to be the truth on some level, there's just a certain aspect of maybe his relationship with Aifread, maybe his conception of the world, that makes him really, really resistant to accepting that truth.
Take a look at this. Scout ship setting sail.
I don't think we've explored the whole world map yet. I think it would tell us if we had. Yeah, we still have another area to unlock from here. Oh, so I guess we'll have to go back to the Hexen Isle at some point, because I clocked there was a code red demon on the map, but we were interrupted by the events with Innominat before we could actually reach it.
I'm glad you didn't win that bet, Magilou.
Sure, you're glad, but what witch would be happy at losing? And you pampered Velvet like crazy! It's your fault I lost!
Really? I don't remember doing anything.
Nope, wasn't us.
Staying out of it is just as bad! If you don't throw salt or sugar into an open wound, you're guilty of being too nice! I lost the bet because of you. You owe me.
In that case, let us get in on the action. Let's make another bet.
Oh? I'm listening.
I'll bet 10,000 gold that Velvet cracks.
Oh.
I'll make that same bet. 10,000.
Uh-huh. Hey! Wait a minute! You both know that I'm the one who wants to bet that she cracks.
Then you should have spoken up first.
We can call
Got her.
everything off if you want.
No. What kind of gambler would I be if I back down now? I'm afraid I have to take that bet. I hereby bet 10,000 that Velvet doesn't crack. What's so funny?
For someone so stubborn, you can be surprisingly cute sometimes.
You're calling a witch cute? That's slander! You both owe me the money you bet as reparations!
That's so funny. I'm glad you reminded me that Lindbeck voices Jesse too, Pottery, because I'm just appreciating the similarity, especially between Jesse and Magilu in terms of their theatrical approach to life. There's more DNA shared between them, speaking of characters who resonate with one another, than I would have been inclined to recognize otherwise. It's an interesting way in which we're seeing Eleanor unfold too. I wanted to mention this after the skit with her talking about how she doesn't really know what the right thing to do is, or who she wants to align with in the long run, but she still wants to resist Artorias because she doesn't agree with him for now. It's almost like she's existing in this interesting middle ground and unresolvable tension like everyone else in the main party. But in her case, it almost seems to be this retreat from like dogma and organized morality in the kind of hegemonic sense that we've ascribed to the Abbey in the past, to something more like a personal and not ad hoc, but kind of presentist and moment-to-moment morality, of saying, look, it's enough for me to uphold my principles according to whatever I think is right at the time. And that might be more chaotic, but it's also more authentic than having these universal maxims that Artorias has and all his peons are able to mindlessly recite without any kind of real content of faith or reason behind them. It's interesting to see the way that she's evolved in that regard, and how perhaps it speaks to the broader ethos of this party relative to broader organized groups like the Abbey. Making us pay for a main story event.
So, should I think of you as my sister?
I'm a Moloch named Ceres. I've inherited Celica's memories, that's all.
And that doesn't make you the same person?
What exactly defines a person's identity? I may have her body and her memories, but...
You're right. If your soul has changed, you're not the same person anymore.
Even if I were Celica, I don't have the right to be called your sister. I followed Artorias' orders without question, sacrificing my own flesh and blood.
What about me? I devoured you. I have no right to condemn you for what you've done.
There's a difference, Velvet. I wanted you to do it. Even had I survived, I would have given myself to you before long. I wanted you to have my power, no matter the cost.
But why?
Right after the Advent, Celica's memories returned to me. It was then I understood what exactly it was I had done. Arthur, kind and caring, transformed into the cruel Artorias he is now.
Why did your memories return?
I don't know. I've heard that very rarely Malachim can regain the memories of their previous lives. Or perhaps this is my punishment for the pain I brought to you all. The stronger I feel my love for Arthur, the less I can forgive Artorias. My hatred of him has grown so deep, I'm not Celica anymore. As Ceres, I can never bring back the Arthur that I loved. Neither do I have the power to defeat Artorias. But you can. You're a Therian. You fully absorbed my power. You can face the Shepherd.
I know. I will stop him.
Forgive me, Velvet. I've pushed everything onto you. My hatred, my determination. I wanted to apologize one last time, at the end.
I'm glad I had a chance to know you. I'm glad that once I could be Laufey's sister, and Celica and Arthur's sister as well. I was happy.
I love these dream sequences so much. That one's great too for so many reasons, and it's really recalling to me now all the reasons that I thought this game had a lot of literary sophistication back when I first played it, even within the context of the Tales series, because you think about the layers of that, right? On the one hand, it's a dream, and so Velvet is really, adjudicating her various representations and relationships with her sister in human form, in both of their human forms, I guess, and then in Celica's form once she became a Malik, and in Velvet's form once she became a Therian. But then also, if we just think about it from Sirius's perspective, because even though it's a dream, I don't think we really have reason to doubt the content of what Sirius is expressing in the dream in terms of the ability for Malakim to sometimes re-experience the memories of when they were human. And so it also does a really interesting job of adding nuance to the theme that we've been talking about in terms of self-contradiction, because remember, that was introduced in the last stream in terms of contradictions in our relationships and understanding of other people in our lives. Now, as we think about the different natures and roles that we play throughout our lives, that same kind of self-contradiction can be turned inward to say that, we might have different identities or understanding of ourselves at different points in our lives, and it might be healthier in some senses to not try to consolidate or reduce all of those to a single coherent sense of self, but rather to understand ourselves as different people in different contexts across our lives. As Velvet said at the end, saying, I'm glad and grateful that I was able to have these familiar relationships in my past and to be happy. That's not to say that she has them in the present context, nor even that she's happy at this moment, but she has a kind of gratitude for that aspect of her identity embedded in her own past. A lot to think about there as we jettison forward into the next stage of this act. Yeah, we gonna talk about how our girl is just radiating malevolence?
Should you be up so soon?
Yeah, but...
Stay back. It's finally come to this. But of course it did. After all, I chose my revenge over a world of peace. I can't complain if people call me the Lord of Calamity.
Velvet, whether you're human, demon, or Lord of Calamity, it doesn't change that you
Oh,
care.
Speaking of symbols.
Laufey said the same thing to me a long time ago. He gave me this comb.
Your heart, I can tell it aches.
Yes. But even still, no. Because of that, I've made up my mind. I'm going to settle things with Artorius and Innominat, once and for all. It must be done. For my sake, and for the sake of those I loved.
Loved in the past tense, in the spirit of everything we were just talking about.
Compass, I'll place my hand on the wheel and chart my own course.
I will defeat Artorius. But if I kill Innominat, Laufey said, and me and the other Therians, they'll all...
A compass.
Eisen, Why the hell didn't you say something?
Good morning to you
Calm down.
too.
You were passed out at the time, okay?
I'm going. I've got to stop him.
What's going on?
We got a message from the Von Eltia.
That's great. Is everyone okay?
Yeah, for now.
Huh?
While Benwick and the others were making their getaway, they got word that Aifread was spotted in Endgame. They said they're on their way to Lionel Island to meet him.
That has to be...
Yes, a trap. No doubt set by that horned demon, who may even be Aifread himself.
He said the sentence.
Aifread is a demon?
Are you serious?
I said may.
Let's head to Lionel Island. Whoever it is, it's a lead. Besides, we can't afford to lose the Von Eltia.
How will we get there? Zaveid probably sailed off with the ship we came in on.
We'll steal one from the harbor. I may be a calamity, but I'm frugal.
What a line. Velvet in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen.
Curse it all. If only I'd noticed sooner.
Prince Percival safely made it back to the capital. The Abbey used everything they had to rescue him.
I heard he was kidnapped by the Lord of Calamity. So if they got him back, that demon must be...
Dead, along with all of her gang. That's what a friend of mine in the Royal Army told me anyway.
The Abbey's propaganda at work again, I see.
We're finally safe! Hurrah!
Hold up. From what I hear, no one knows if the Lord of Calamity actually gave up the ghost. Her hideout got destroyed, but some say she managed to escape.
What makes them think she escaped?
Fishermen from Port Renid saw a fleet of Abbey ships near that island that's rumored to be a prison. Just a little bit later, they saw a pirate ship speeding away from the area where the Abbey ships were headed.
Well, that was definitely us. Guess it isn't that easy to hide the truth.
There was some talk a while ago about prisoners' bodies washing up on shore at Port Renid. So that story sounds plausible, at least.
It does. And here I thought I was safe. So where did the Lord of Calamity go?
The Abbey needs to get their act together and put that monster down already.
Go ahead. Talk all you like.
I love the way the Tales series does this, and I hope that they continue to play around with it in the future games. I don't see any reason why they wouldn't, but the different ways in which the heroes' journeys are disseminated and interpreted and understood and misunderstood across the game, like what we've been seeing across the course of Berseria, with all of the rumors spinning out of control about the group's misadventures as we've traveled through the world and returned to places we've been previously and everything like that. The Wonder Reporter in Tales of Vesperia comes to mind too as an example of that. Even something like, Dawn of the New World is maybe not quite the same idea because it's not in parallel with the activity of the party. But one of the things that I really appreciated most about replaying that game was the idea of the journey, not just the journey of regeneration, but the journey to reunite the worlds being reinterpreted into a kind of new world mythology and seen through the eyes of people who weren't directly involved but heard the stories and made different meaning out of it, whether that was people who further deified the Chosen because of it, or people like Marta who lost family members because of the activity of the party. These stories are such great portraits of characters who have such radical impact on the world. But one of the most interesting things to me about that kind of impact is seeing how the other members of the world actually come to understand it and make meaning of it in their own lives. And Tales games are fantastic for giving us insight into that.
Ship heading toward the Sea of No Return. I wonder what they're doing.
They've made that whole area off limits. The guild got an order from the Abbey telling us to stay away.
They're being nice and careful, and taking precautions to keep the secret of Hexen Isle just that.
Yeah, but order or not, no one here is stupid enough to try to sail there.
It's said that compasses go dead, and monsters from the deep appear to swallow ships whole. Whatever the case, ships really have sailed there to never return. Everyone knows that the Sea of No Return is bad news.
Come to think of it, I heard a ship from some other town strayed into those waters and got attacked by a dragon.
A dragon? You sure they didn't just get a bad case of the Corsair Scourge and dream up the whole thing?
Well, that was my reaction, but then again, the Abbey did tell everyone to stay away, so something must be there. Whatever it is, we'd all best leave it be.
The Sea of No Return. What a poetic name.
For the Malachim taken there, that poem is a tragic one.
Everywhere the Abbey sets foot ends up the same.
We are definitely at this point racking up some debt in terms of those optional Class 4 islands or whatever they're called and similar pieces of side content, but I have a feeling based on how things have been so far and how it played in Zestiria and also how it worked in Arise that we're not going to suddenly get walled off from being able to see that content through, so I'm feeling good about our current path to lean more into the main story and see how things shake out, and then perhaps once we've reached the end or even rolled the credits, we can circle back to some of the side content as we've done in the past.
How about this one? The hull looks sturdy, and I don't see anyone aboard.
You're surprisingly into this.
Yeah, let's do crime.
Got a criminal streak in you after
I've decided it's the morally right thing to do at this particular
What
moment.
do you think, Eisen?
She'll do. Let's take her.
Oh, we can literally only go there right now anyway, so there you go. Removing the agony of choice from the equation. And rough! Aifread! Oh, I think I forgot to reset our expedition again. Well, I'll have to remember to do that once we drop anchor.
Eisen, everything all right?
We're almost at Lionel Island, all thanks to this ship. She's got a good compass.
Yeah.
If only my inner compass held as steady.
Oh, buddy.
The first moment I laid eyes upon that demon, I think I knew it was Aifread. But some part of me refused to accept it.
That's what I was saying.
Because you're Aifread's friend, don't you think? After all, he taught you that the Reaper's curse was part of you, part of your creed.
We were lost at sea once. 20 straight days we floated together, close to death. And all he says is, you sure know how to liven up an adventure.
He sounds like an incredible person.
You did the same thing for Velvet, you know.
Only because you taught me how, Eisen. Your wheel is yours to hold, right?
That's right. That's what it is to live by one's...
Look, it's Lionel Island.
Not good. The Von Eltia's already there. We're too late.
Oh, Jesus.
Eleanor!
Oh, at least they're still alive.
What happened? Allhorn's demon attacked us out of nowhere.
They're breathing. Barely.
Zaveid rushed here to save us. Had he not come when he did, we'd all be dead.
This is all because I hesitated.
Where'd they go? Zaveid lured the beast away, towards the interior.
Let's go.
Oh, man. No, I want to talk to the guy on the ground. Come on. Oh, thank God, Kurgan is okay too. He was the only fella I didn't see in that scene. Like he has no fighting style at all. That's interesting. Looks like the poor guy's tail hasn't made any more progress in regrowing yet. No one wants to accept that this demon is Aifread. I suppose you wouldn't want to, that leader who's been your North Star for so long. Again, I guess I just have Tales of Symphonia on the brain now, but that to me, and what we're talking about with regard to Aifread now, is a little bit of an echo of Mythos too, in terms of how he was a leader and a hero, and someone whom Kratos mentored and followed and supported, only for him to go dark side and never go back. And for his other companions like Ewan and Kratos to have to come to terms with that and accept that he was something different than he had been. Kind of strikes a similar chord to what's going on with the crew and Aifread. Even using the ship's codes against it. Away we go. Oh, but I wanted to check on our expedition. No, I didn't forget. It's just taking a while. I swear I'm going to go out of my way for this chest, and it's going to be something that we can't even pick up. Ah, nice. Or it's an all divide. Sometimes it's worth the extra steps. Oh, double all divide.
We're finished here. Let's go.
I want to remap my party because I like being able to sub Velvet out for Eisen on the fly. It seemed to be a good rhythm for us last time. My man.
You made me unleash my full power. You'll be rust on my blade.
Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem! Want some next? Jade Wing!
It's over, right?
Take a look at this.
And we do... Oh, excellent.
Now here's a fine haul.
I want to get more of the artifacts. I know you never get triples. Triples is best, but you never get triples. Oh, and there's one more special. I really want to see what the last artifact from the Tales of the Abyss region is.
Setting sail.
I hope it's a Mew plushie.
Always be on guard.
Reaper's Curse? What Reaper's Curse? Our luck is untouchable. And now I've jinxed us for the rest of the playthrough, I'm sure. Especially since we are in hot pursuit of Aifread.
I'll cut down anyone in my way.
I'm remembering now, way too late in the game, I'm sure, that there are those special demons who only emerge when you engage in chains of battles in certain areas. And I'm sure the fact that I'd forgotten that is a big part of why we have not encountered them in quite a while, so I figured it would be good to try to get a little momentum in some field battles and see if we could conjure up another one of those.
If you want to live, get out of my
Because on the few occasions that that did happen, it was a pretty fun surprise.
Let's get started.
Every day I'm juggling.
Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem!
Fly away, little birdie. Far away.
Don't tell me why. Don't tell me why you fly. I'm not interested in that. That's not my bag. I just want you to do the flying. More enemies. Keep my chain going. Give me one of those special demons while I'm thinking about it.
Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem!
Fly away, little birdie. Far away.
Super outlaw. Oh man. When you're not just an outlaw, but even an outlaw amongst outlaws. Well, if ever someone were gonna bear that title, it would be our boy Eisen, wouldn't it? Edna, don't come near me! I'm a super outlaw!
But I'm this close. I want this. Form zero.
Was that demon really Aifread?
Yes.
Eisen would know better than anyone, so I'd take it as a fact.
But I thought when people have a strong will like you and Kurogane, they don't lose themselves upon becoming a demon. From how Eisen talks about him, I'd say his strength of will should be considerable.
Even if you don't lose yourself, a demon is a demon. When you change, you're no longer human. I don't remember how I felt as a human, but I bet the human me would have thought I'm a real monster.
But would the old part of Aifread allow him to be so obedient to the Abbey?
No. He didn't seem to be following Melchior of his own free will. I imagine Melchior's illusory arts are at play.
Like what we saw at Loringen in a ball? Is that enough to control a demon?
It would seem so. But more importantly, someone with a psyche resilient enough to impress Eisen should be extraordinarily hard to turn into a demon.
So Melchior must be using a particularly nasty illusion, eh?
Aifread, Eisen, please be okay.
Here I come!
Another interesting dimension to keep in mind as we're thinking about different versions of characters in terms of how they change over their lives and when they are or are not the same, right? Is which characters like had agency to decide when and how they were going to change versus which characters had that thrust upon them. Like, I think it's fair to say, probably without exception, we haven't seen a demon or Malik who chose to become that way from being human. They all had those state changes imposed on them by something like the advent of malevolence or dying and being reborn. But then you also have characters like Magilu, who seems to have defected from her dad and chosen her own path in life, which is pretty discontinuous with what his whole ethos and raison d'etre seems to be. We have Eleanor, like we were talking about, who defected from the Abbey and seems to be pretty discontinuous with sort of her blind obedience, or even just being guided by the dogma of the Abbey back when she was operating as an exorcist on their behalf. So it'd be interesting to think about whether and how that decision to segment one's character or identity into different phases, like how the agency over that impacts your relationship with those different aspects of yourself, if at all.
We have to hurry. Zaveid's all alone.
Well, he's not exactly an ally. He's got his own creed. Remember the White-Horned Dragon? He might try to protect Aifread.
So Eisen might too, right? This is Aifread we're talking about, so...
He's a demon now. He's not Eisen's old buddy anymore.
Even if we can't bring him back to being human, there has to be something we can do to make him... himself again.
If he's a demon, he'll never be himself again. He attacked Benwick and the rest of his crew. The old Aifread's gone.
So, what does Eisen plan to do?
I don't know. That's up to him. Worst case, we might have to fight him too. It's best you prepare yourself for that possibility.
But...
Not if I can help it.
Here I come!
Ready to die? Think you can dodge? Just try. Perfect mayhem!
You won't get any pity or compassion from me.
I see we're going in a different direction now. Oh, okay. It must be the area that was previously blocked off by the two other barriers on the far end of the marsh. In which case, we should be able to take the shortcut back to get there a little faster. If I go through all these fights and don't get one of those special demons I was talking about, I'm gonna be pretty miffed. What's the point then? The experience? Whom do you take me for? Gravity mine? Hardly a worthy reward. Fun? No, nonsense. You think we play video games here to have fun, Pottery? My god. What kind of a neophyte are you?
Fly away, little birdie. Far away.
I do love the experience bonus for characters who just annihilate the last enemies in battle with their mystic art. That's a nice touch that makes me feel like they really achieved something. I think we've had this conversation before, Pottery, because I can picture myself telling you in the past that I am the last person who would call you out and say that's a hot take. I mean, I think my hope is that as the medium continues to mature and more people grow up with it as their chosen form of literature where they consume most of their stories, it'll just be a foregone conclusion that video games don't need to be fun. I mean, this is maybe not the best go-to example, but one that I feel always makes this point pretty decisively and quickly is Death Stranding. Like, you're not going to tell me that Death Stranding isn't an artistic and meaningful video game. You're also not going to tell me that Death Stranding is fun to play, all right? But it is. I still come across a lot of people who just take it as table stakes that video games are games, and games need to be fun and entertaining, and that's their primary purpose. So those people do exist, but I think by and large the discourse is moving at a glacial pace past them at this point. That's my hot take. Yeah, great minds, Pottery. Great minds. I wrote this article, actually. It's a short piece, and it was more reactionary than anything, but since it's one that is old and rarely ever comes up, and it's happened to, I'll share it. So one of the games that really got me into studying video games in the first place was Nier, what's now known as Nier Gestalt, but at the time when it came out in, I think, 2012, it was the only version of Nier that we had in the States. So it was just called Nier. That's a great example as well, Pottery. But so I shared it with a friend of mine who was also big on gaming. And I loved this game. I've said way too much about it. I think it's one of those stories that's just so interesting and you can read it in so many different ways. And his reaction to me when he played it, which is fair, and I don't want to devalue his experience, but I was kind of taken aback by it, was he said, yeah, you know, the world just felt really drab and it was not very engaging and it was hard for me to buy into or like have fun exploring it. And I just like, that was one of those moments for me talking about how we arrive at our ideas of whether or not a game needs to be fun, Pottery, where I just like, the more I was thinking about it, like the more it was sort of a watershed moment for me realizing, man, you know, I don't think Nier is the kind of game that wants to be like a fun, colorful Mario world, and I feel like that's kind of the point of the story it's telling and the universe that it's creating. That for all you explore, not the more depressed you get, but it's bleak in a way that directly speaks to its themes. And like I said, I do think that as we develop more of a storytelling language around games and the medium becomes more robust, there are a million great examples of storytellers who play around with tons of worlds like that. But I do think there are a lot of storytellers and designers and, like publishers even, who, especially after open worlds got really hot, they just took the approach of saying, yeah, we have to stuff as much as possible into worlds and make it like constant, never-ending Disneyland experience where people are overstimulated with fun things. And that just strikes me as such a bad inference to think that that's the only or the best thing that video games ought to be about and the experience that you want to get from them. So, but like I said, pottery, great minds. Well, we've mowed down all the grunts, and as I feared, no special demon has appeared. But oh well. The real special demons were the memories we made along the way. Oh, boy, speaking of Nier, I guess, huh?
There are none who can resist my spear.
She's not wrong.
Let's get started. No mercy. Won't that
There's almost a part of me as I'm going through all these battles actually that wonders what Tales of Berseria would have felt like if it were designed a little more in the spirit of Tales of Arise, because Tales of Arise was a departure gameplay-wise for the Tales series in a number of ways, and one was just that they really tried to make the transition between battle and world navigation a lot more fluid and non-differentiated than has been the norm for the series, even in the immediately preceding entry, Tales of Berseria. And as we're going through the run-up to Aifread, it strikes me that as we really are taking the time to do all of the random encounters, it almost feels more natural and consistent with the theming of the game for the party to just be mowing down enemies and being really aggressive, and for that to just be like the natural cadence of how they're progressing through the world. And that contrary-wise, it feels a little inauthentic when we're just skirting around enemies, even though we're mostly doing it to save time and not have to deal with every random encounter. And so I wonder whether if Berseria had had a little bit more fluidity between world navigation and battle so that it didn't feel like as much of a transition to go back and forth all the time, whether it might have been easier to encourage that kind of aggression as just the MO for navigating throughout the whole world, and whether that might have made it even easier for the player to get into and mirror and resonate with the mindset of the party. Not that this doesn't work, but that just strikes me as a way in which it might more tightly align our mode of navigation with the way the party thinks about their place in the world and what it is they're trying to achieve.
Fly away, little birdie, far away.
So many cat souls, and yet I feel as though we have not had a cat's chest in a while. Oh, speaking of chest, I totally missed that side path. I was too busy thinking about the dynamics of world navigation to actually navigate the world comprehensively. Irony can be so painful. Military hike! Right. That's something worth equipping. It's been a minute since we've equipped any new stuff. Where is it? I thought it was a pair of boots. Oh, I tried.
It's over, right?
Oh no! Aifread, no! Zaveid, no!
Zaveid, you alright? Stop. I know these fists. This is Aifread.
Why didn't you fight back?
Aifread. She pulled me back from the brink. I owe him. This time, it's my turn to bring him back.
A demon can never be human again.
Pottery, do you mean in terms of like gameplay, world structure, themes, story, just general feel? What's most useful to you? Because that's a topic I could talk about 8 ways to Sunday from different perspectives, and I'm happy to.
So what? That's supposed to make me change my creed? What do you think, Aifread?
Oh, Jesus. That I was not expecting.
Zaveid!
Going after kids now? Benwick and your crew risked their lives by your side. Zaveid's an idiot, but he stands by his beliefs. I won't let anyone trample their creeds.
Wow.
Even you!
Notice that's also a great example that's not explicated or beaten to death with overwriting of the kind of self-contradiction that we saw from the end of the last stream onwards, because it was very much, we learned much earlier in this game, thanks to Aifread, that Eisen was able to develop his own creed, and so he's really using the inspiration he drew from Aifread to now stand up to this demonized version of Aifread, which is cool to see. Yeah, Pottery, I mean, very different worlds, interestingly similar themes in the same way that, like we've been talking about, a lot of the Tales games wrestle with similar themes, and like Dan and I talk about in our PAX West lecture, the Final Fantasy games wrestle with similar themes of fate, and so while it's very different between the worlds in terms of how they think about that, you get similar themes. I would say if you liked the gameplay of Final Fantasy VII Remake, I think they lean into a similar direction with Final Fantasy 16. A lot of people were actually, I would say wrongly, disappointed with Final Fantasy 16 because they felt like the gameplay was very action-oriented and real-time, fast-paced in a way that was not consistent with sort of the older school turn-based RPG style combat that you get in earlier Final Fantasy titles. But I would say it feels of a piece with a lot of Final Fantasy VII Remake, its design philosophy around combat and just the way it's tied in with the overall navigation through the world seamlessly, and is similarly like fast-paced and dynamic, gets the adrenaline going. It's over before you realize it, but then there are also big cinematic fights that advance the story. So if you liked it, I would say, Final Fantasy 16 is a great game, a game that I really loved and is one of my highlights for the year, especially outside of the Tales series. And I think it's a really great example of sort of what is becoming the modern standard for a JRPG that is a rich game with a story worth exploring, but also a game that leans heavily on really robust, like blockbuster scale cinematic experiences, because Square Enix is, one of the few companies that can truly get away with that on the scale of a full length JRPG. So I think it's worth playing both for the joy of the gameplay experience and also just for sort of the moment in JRPG development history it represents. Honestly, I think people are going to be talking about it for a long time in that respect. Oh no! Oh, but that purifies malevolence, right? Is he going to regain control of himself? Or somehow use it to power himself up?
Aifread. And now, it's time to pay it back.
Interesting.
Are you all right with this, Aizen?
Let's settle this.
I wonder what it was that hitting himself with Siegfried achieved.
Killing flash, but I'm this close. I won't get 4-0.
Presumably, based on the too much that we know about Siegfried, that would help him access his will and self-determination and free himself from Melchior's influence. So maybe he wanted to have the chance to honestly challenge Aizen rather than act as a pawn. That would be interesting. Speaking of which, absolutely we need to put Aizen on the front line in this battle. Are you kidding me? Oh no, I'm so slow! Oh no, and Rokuro is so dead. I guess, Pottery, I'm still thinking a little bit about the ways to differentiate the gameplay systems in Remake versus 16. I guess the one other thing I would say is, I don't know if you ever played or heard anything about Final Fantasy 13, that whole series, which, of course, I've ranted about from a narrative perspective before, but in terms of gameplay, it has this system called Paradigm Shift, which is basically predicated upon having these different roles with different abilities, so stuff like Magic Caster versus Melee Artist versus Sentinel, things like that, and you're expected to kind of dynamically shift between them according to the situation in the battles, and so that's definitely not something that's part of the design language of Remix battles, but that is central to the way in which you engage in combat in 16, so I don't know if that's something that sounds interesting to you or not, but while sort of the pacing and real-time nature of the battles is similar, that dimension of sort of how do you engage with the character's abilities and shuffle and navigate them during battle, like there's a lot more shuffling and that kind of like role management that happens in a real-time basis in 16 versus what you get in Remake. Yeah, I think that's one thing that you can say pretty incontrovertibly about the 13 games is that no matter what your thoughts are at the end of the series, if you have played them, then you have many thoughts about them. Oh, but we would need a whole other stream for the good, the bad, and the ugly of that. And needless to say, there's a lot we could go on about that. One of the games that I have I don't know the right way to express this ratio, but it's unusual for me in terms of having like a very high volume of negative thoughts about it, but also a very, very pressing impulse to replay them and re-experience them, to have new thoughts about them, which I think is an achievement in and of itself. Okay, so there you go, Pottery. So I'll put it this way. Dan and I, when we were playing through 16 in parallel with each other, we said this almost at the same time to each other. Playing through 16, it felt like one of those cases where like a game studio was trying something out with Paradigm Shift and they finally perfected it in 16 system. So I would say, especially if you were a big fan of Paradigm Shift, you should play 16 just for that alone, especially if you're in it for the gameplay. Because I would say, at least for me, all the things that I really enjoyed about Paradigm Shift, because I had a lot of interest in that system too. I felt like it was interesting and novel, and I feel like it's much more fluid, much more thematically consonant, just much more interesting in general in 16.
End of the road.
Taking hostages now.
I'm sorry. Just forget about me. I'm prepared for whatever.
Well, that doesn't really seem like Aifread has control over his own actions. Unless there's something we're missing still.
All right. You've grown. You're a man now. Family, friends, everything I ever tried to hold on to, all of it trickled away, fell from my grasp. But a certain idiot once told me, if you can't hold something in your hand, then make a fist and take it by force. This fist will take everything back.
Oh, Eisen.
Just like you told me to!
Boy, Demon Aifread has such an expressive face.
I know this fist. It's you.
Oh.
Caused you a lot of trouble, didn't I?
Wow.
Don't worry about it. We're friends, right?
That's so touching too, just knowing everything that we know about Siegfried. Again, that a weapon that is literally designed to dispel malevolence couldn't free Aifread from Melchior's clutches, but the fist of his friend Eisen could do that. That's just so perfectly simple as a way of driving to the heart of their relationship. I love that.
Aifread!
That's awesome.
A demon changed back into a human?
Power of purification, baby.
Forget it. It's too late.
I'm sorry. If I only knew how to use my power.
Stop crying. Didn't you say you were prepared for anything?
But, Eisen, you were searching for Aifread for so long.
You're still as soft as you ever were. Boy, I'll let you know little secrets.
That's a very apt way of putting it, Potter.
Comes from being part of Innominat. Which means, if you can seal off his domain, you actually got a chance of putting up a good fight.
Seal off his domain?
The 4 elemental Empyreans sleeping in the earth pulses. If you can rouse them from their slumber. Hurry,
While Artorias and Innominat are occupied, they're getting ready for some ceremony of suppression. It's now or never, kid.
Thank you, Aifread.
I'm just sad I can't go with you. It sounds like a goddamn blast.
I won't apologize.
You shouldn't. I'm grateful. You always kept things from getting dull. If we ever meet again, let's raise some hell. Eisen.
Yeah, we will. See you, Aifread.
It's amazing how vividly you can see his character, even though we truly only see him in that one scene, just by virtue of all the stories that were told about him and the impact he's had on everyone we've met over the course of the journey.
I owe you one, Zaveid.
What a character.
We had a chance to bring him back, but you went and killed him. Next time I see you, we'll settle the score. Between me and your creed.
The promise that binds Zaveid and Eisen, even in the times of Zestiria, perhaps? Smells that way, settling their creeds. Interesting, too, because of course that shows the bond between Zaveid and Eisen, which lives on in Zestiria, but also it was occurring to me as we saw that, like, there's an interesting through line, too, of just the meaning of a worthy death and dying in a way that's honest to your character and what you care about in both of the games. Because, of course, that's one of the touching things about how Aifread dies there is that, yeah, he dies, but like we were saying, in respect to Laphicet the Anti-Estelle, he's able to purify Zaveid in his moment of death and kind of help him reclaim his humanity and have a freedom from Melchior's influence at last. And Zaveid, he bears witness to that, and then he also bears witness to Dezel's death and his moment of a similarly honest sacrifice in order to save Rose from Simone's machinations and sacrifice his own kind of cursed existence for the hope of a different future. And so it's interesting to me thinking more about Zaveid as someone who's borne witness to that kind of sacrifice. It helps me understand a little bit more, I think, why he would be so inclined to understand and take up the mantle of Dezel after Dezel dies and sacrifices himself, because he understands the meaning of that gesture by virtue of everything that he's been through with Aifread and this gang here in Tales of Berseria. Oh, fantastic. Now we can escape from dungeons whenever we want to. Talk about an item you can actually use.
So, we need to wake the 4 elemental Empyreans? But how do we do it? Dunno. Maybe you tickle their divine footsies with a feather until they...
You're back!
And you're looking better.
Somehow. But what happened to that demon?
We killed him. Benwick. He...
Let me tell him. The rest of you, find Grimoire and ask her about the 4 Empyreans.
Eisen.
Are you sure?
Do it. He gave us this chance. We can't waste it.
Okay.
Will our luck hold? No. Oh, but Eleanor's is the skill that can turn the odds. Love that. Isles of Noct and Dia. All right. A whole new world. An alluring but dangerous island where strong feelings are said to be given form. Even time flows at different speeds, depending on the location here. What is this, Pottery? Is this meaningful to you? Are we rocking a Xillia 2 reference that Aaron can just barely get from his modicum of context about that game, or are we in some other corner of the Tales world? It doesn't resonate with the ones I know chapter and verse so far. And we're off. Man, that Aifread plot really crept up on me. It felt like something that started out as a side plot and almost ended up like a secondary main plot. Like, it really was more of a through line to the overall narrative than I expected it to be. Tales of Zawarudo. Huh, I never would have gotten that. Is that the same thing as... I'm peeking over at my shelf. That's the series Radiant Mythology is from, right? Yeah, Tales of the World Radiant Mythology. That's the title of the one that was ported to English. I do have that one on my list and on my shelf, but not one I've gotten to yet. So maybe we will get that reference before all is said and done. Yeah, with all the, well, not just cameos, but I think even cool side plots expanding the worlds of, I know Tales of the Abyss is in that one. I know they do Fantasia. I think Destiny. Yeah. It's one I'm excited to visit once I actually have all of the context from the other games.
Resurrect the elemental Empyreans. True. If we do that, we might be able to suppress Innominat's domain.
It may even liberate the minds of the Malachim that Innominat has under his control.
I'm sure some will no longer obey their exorcists.
Good. We'll take a big bite out of their forces.
More importantly, Innominat will lose the ability to enhance the resonance of his exorcists. Most exorcists will no longer even be able to perceive Malachim at all, just like before. Of course, anyone as innately gifted as me is another story.
Will I become unable to see Laphicet?
We won't know until we try.
Eleanor... Then let's give it a shot. I'll accept whatever happens.
But these elemental Empyreans, they're gods, right? You sure it's okay to disturb their beauty sleep?
They control the 4 elements. Waking them is likely to upset the balance of the world quite a bit.
I'll take that as a no then.
We don't even know how to revive them, at worst.
If it's anything like the opening, then we need to offer a sacrifice at the Earth Pulse on a Scarlet Night.
We have to kill someone?
The act of killing is not essential to the ceremony. All that's needed is a soul free of malevolence.
If that's true, then doesn't Velvet already have a whole belly full of them?
The exorcists I devoured.
It's perfect! You're a Therian. You're capable of releasing the power you absorb. The souls of the high-ranking exorcists you ate should do nicely.
Use Oscar and Teresa's souls to resurrect the Empyreans?
It's worth a try at least. When's the next Scarlet Night? 3 years after the Advent. In other words, soon.
Do we have enough time? The 4 Empyreans are asleep in different places, right?
Correct. 4 Earth Pulses for 4 Empyreans. But if you use a life pool, you may be able to awaken all 4 at the same time.
A life pool?
Earth Pulses normally flow horizontally, but in exceptionally rare cases, they can flow vertically. This causes energy to collect at the Earth Pulse's base, forming a life pool. Though sometimes the energy flows the other way, upward, into what's called a life spring.
Neither of which ought to be confused with a life stream.
One of these life pools, a single sacrifice could reach all 4 Empyreans.
Where are they? There's a life pool in the northern reaches of Midgand, but I heard a large temple was built over it recently.
That's the Empyrean throne! We can't go there, it's Innominat's home base!
Ah, most unfortunate.
Couldn't we use a life spring? It all connects to the same place, right? We'll have to go against its flow, but...
We'll force the soul right down its throat.
Where's the nearest life spring?
Our best bet would be Mount Killerhouse.
Eisen?
I'm fine. What's done is done.
Killerhouse? That's the volcano on the northernmost tip of Northgand, but it's a hellscape of ice and lava!
Naturally. Killerhouse is the most powerful life spring there is.
So, in short, we shove the souls of the exorcists into the molten core of that volcano.
That should awaken the 4 elemental Empyreans. Together, they will seal off Innominat's domain. It's just a theory, but...
It's one I'll put my money on.
Me too.
Then we're off to Northgand. Mount Killerhouse is north of Helaves.
It's not a epic fantasy tale if you don't have to return the ring to a giant volcano at the end of the day, is it? Padre, do you mean pet theme questions in JRPGs in general, or stories in general, or religion in general, or just Tales of Berseria? That's such a multi-dimensional theosophical question you pose. Always especially interesting in JRPGs, no doubt, since there can be so many kinds of god-like figures representing different things. Yeah, I feel you. I oftentimes work with a TV show I'm familiar with in the background just as kind of white noise to help my mind think. And so, God help me, I've been working through Supernatural again from front to back, which is 15 very uneven seasons, but I'm in one of the parts where one of the characters thinks he has become a god, but hasn't actually become a god. So I do think some of the most interesting stories are ones in which there's a sufficiently clear sense of godliness that there can be like well-defined answers to whether or not something counts as a god, but also it's sufficiently inscrutable to mortals that there can be confusion as to whether something is a god or not. I think that gives you a lot of play. And we've even seen that in Tales of Berseria, right? That was one of the questions like from the outset with this resurrection of Innominat. Like, well, he's this powerful Malik, he has this particular history, but does that really make him an Empyrean? Is he really a god? Is his nature in the world something that really has this kind of cosmological import that the Abbey is claiming it does? I think those are interesting questions. Oh, interesting. Yeah, see, I haven't played a lick of Destiny 2, but I hear things like that make me interested enough in it to check it out. Yeah, it would be even interesting to think at some point about, in terms of JRPGs that seem to end with godlike figures, which one of them really counts as gods and why. I think of something like Necron in Final Fantasy IX, who clearly seems to be some kind of a deus ex machina, but how much deus is really in that deus ex machina? Just for something to have this kind of metaphysical and maybe even otherworldly presence doesn't need to necessarily follow from it that it's a god. But I think, like I was saying, for me, I think it comes down to sort of the internal like thematic rule set of the world and what kind of being is well poised to arbitrate and govern the nature of that particular world. And I think a well-defined JRPG will also have, in most cases, in the cases where it matters at least, like a cosmology that will give clear answers to that. I know, that's the thing that's most interesting to me. Like, it was not on my radar for those reasons at all when it came out. And then over the years, I've just heard drips and drabs about its story where I have to do a double take and ask, is this the same Destiny that I'm thinking of that you're talking about? Because that sounds way more interesting than I would have expected. But I don't know. I dipped in and out of Halo over the years, and I found myself, I feel like I talked about this on the stream at one point or another, but the bits of like actual Halo campaign and stuff with like Chief versus Locke and Cortana and stuff that I dipped into and out of over the years, like I found it more interesting than I expected when I was just diving into it with no expectations. So they tell good stories sometimes. I also have little idea what sort of technical difficulties I was having with my green screen, so hopefully they're resolved now, but I will definitely do some troubleshooting before Friday. Oh, is that right? Well, there you go. That's Aaron showing his ignorance. Bungie games are not my strong suit. But there you go, right? It's the stereotype expectation from someone on the outside versus someone who's actually played the games. All right, that's fine. I'll take the L on that one. Asked and answered. I take your point. But you know, it's like, what's another example of that? I don't have another good example of that. Maybe I'm just an idiot. I feel like there are lots of games that throw weird names around without, making it deep and substantive within their stories. Isn't it an acronym for something, Halo? What's the acronym? You're clearly deep in the lore, Pottery. The burden of proof is on you to explain all of the lore to me. I'll just sit back and avail myself of your knowledge base.
The ship's ready to sail. Where are you headed?
We don't have a problem. If you got a grudge, we can settle.
You can't deny a shifting of the burden of proof. That's illegal.
The first mate fought like the first mate. The captain died like the captain, right?
I suppose.
Then no swabby here can blame you for what happened. We're Aifread's pirates, and don't forget it. We're not so pathetic that we need
Oh, it's not.
Lord of Calamity.
It's just one of those things that's always
The ship's
capitalized.
in your hands.
Aye, aye. You can count on us.
That's definitely not confusing. Okay, like Sephiroth. It took me a minute. It's like Sephiroth in Final Fantasy VII versus the Sephiroth in Tales of the Abyss. Tales of the Abyss is the most Kabbalistic JRPG of which I could ever conceive. It is deeply religious and esoteric through and through. As you know, I have talked to death and published to death. But Sephiroth, the character, the entity, the concept in Final Fantasy VII, I would say, and I think most people would say, does not really have that much to do with Kabbalah. Now, are there other religious, concepts and icons in that game? Absolutely. No doubt about that. But in terms of the name pointing to a particular religious connotation, that link is not there, and I rest my case. All right, now I can die happy. I had to come up with one fucking example. I don't know why it was that hard.
The Von Altia looks the same as ever. But it feels utterly different, doesn't it?
It's capitalized. I know you were yelling at me, but it's also capitalized, right? I'm not a crazy person.
I can imagine. But if we let ourselves despair now, we'd be a disgrace to Aifread's creed.
We have to swallow our anger.
Okay, it's not capitalized, but I'm also not a crazy person. It's always capitalized on like the box art and in stylizations, but it's not actually capitalized in the title of the game. One of those really clear and not ambiguous or confusing things.
Turning them into a puppet. It's unconscionable.
Still, a heart can never be fully bridled. It can be shattered, but never erased entirely.
Aifread proved that.
Right. His body is gone, but he lives on through his crew. Magilu is right. What lives in one's heart can never be erased.
You know what it's like? It's like Soma. I don't know if you've ever played that. Fantastic game. I think Frictional, if I remember right, is the studio that put it out. But that's also one that's like inexplicably stylized in capitalization. But as best as anyone can tell, it's not an acronym. It's just, soma, like the Latin word for body, which has tons of thematic connotations and insights into the game, but it's equally confusing when you're trying to figure out the right way to stylize it and why it is called that in the way that it is. Well, there you go. And see, if I knew a lick about actual Halo lore, I certainly would have been able to draw that conclusion. Interestingly enough, free word association, but there is also an arc with similar utility in Soma. So all games that use this stylization and titling system are clearly all connected within the same religious cosmology, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, the heart is eternal.
Arguably the worst point at which to cut that skit off. I apologize. All right, off to Helleviews. To Mount Doom we go. Oh, I meant to call this out earlier, but interesting too that as far as I can tell, I mean, what we're hearing now is Velvet's theme. That's how it's been used throughout the game. But when Laphicet was finally fully actualizing himself and standing up to Innominat, same theme that played. It was the string version as opposed to the piano version, but What a touching and kind of cool way of showing their bond and the way in which Velvet has empowered this Malik, an unborn sibling of hers, reborn, to determine his own identity and course in the world. Cool way to show that with leitmotifs. I was talking about 5 pottery. And to be clear, I'm talking from the outside in terms of having very much dipped in and out of that campaign while my roommate in undergrad was playing through it on my Xbox One. And beyond that, my Halo background consists of lots of LAN parties on Blood Gulch and lots of online multiplayer in Halo 4, also in undergrad, just with my roommate when we were taking study breaks. So that is the totality of my experience with it. It is not video games in the sense of like Aaron's philosophy of video games, like library familiarity with stories. So please don't think less of me for my lack of understanding about the religious symbology of Halo. I did not mean to denigrate it. It's a very cool series. Oh, there you go. See, the more you know. I learned so much from you, Potter.
Like a twig.
I'm afraid so. It was Innominat who did it. But I think Shigure could have done the same.
So hardness alone isn't enough. Forgive me. I thought I had found clarity, but it was only foolish pride.
You should be proud. You are, without a doubt, the greatest swordsmith in the world. I'm looking forward to your next blade.
Oh.
Even now, you would still place your trust in me.
Of course. Is there any other swordsmith who could craft a blade out of orichalcum? You're a master of your art, a visionary who spent centuries working to forge a blade of legend. I'm honored to know you.
I don't know what to say.
Unless, of course, you've given up on making a sword to surpass Stormhowl.
Does this look like the face of a man who's given up?
My man.
Not in the least.
We're making good time.
Maybe the interesting thing, and I don't mean to keep interrupting this really cool cutscene, but I was thinking back to something that we talked about way earlier in the playthrough. Padre, it might have been you who brought it up actually, but maybe it was Grail. This idea of like the number of characters that we see who have lost or otherwise had modified parts of their body, like Velvet's arm and Kuragane's loss of his head and Dial's loss of his tail, and there's another one. It escapes me. Anyway, but I wonder, maybe something interesting to say there to tie into what we were talking about before in terms of Innominat's agency versus Laphicet. Thank you, Rokurozai. That's what I was reaching for, Pottery. There's something interesting, I think, maybe in the idea that these characters who are more at peace with themselves and able to chart their course in life are able to do so kind of by virtue of what they've learned from what they've lost, whereas Laphicet kind of takes the other path of like seeking new abilities and a new kind of agency with this new body that is multiply abled, whereas his previous physical form was totally useless. And Innominat is kind of the antithesis of the lesson that all of the other party members have learned in terms of figuring out what they want by virtue of what they've lost. Innominat kind of goes in the opposite direction. Maybe that's one way into it. Yeah, that's right, Pottery. Arthur lost the use of one of his arms in the events leading up to the Advent. So maybe we would have to tease this out more, but maybe we can think about it before Friday. Maybe Arthur to Artorias is kind of the conceptual bridge between the party and Innominat, where he's also lost something, some kind of physical ability like the party has, but he kind of goes the wrong way and learns the wrong thing from it in enacting the plan of Innominat and submitting to kind of Melchior's will, as we saw in his flashbacks. So maybe that's one way to wrap our head around it. I don't think so, Pottery. No, I don't think he's gotten it back. I think he's just figured out other ways to make up for that deficit, but more dogmatic ways than how the party has gone, evidently.
The only problem is that ceremony that Artorias was going on about. We don't know how long it'll take.
Aifread said they called it the Ceremony of Suppression. Most likely, it's how Innominat plans to release his power.
Most likely. He hasn't absorbed Laphicet in your despair, so Innominat should still be incomplete. But if his powers fully awaken...
Humanity will be robbed of their free will.
I can hear them celebrating now. The uglinesses of the human soul are suppressed. And the world is free of malevolence! Hurrah! Hurrah!
Robbing humanity of its will. They'll be like I once was. Something's coming!
Yeah, I think that's definitely one way into it, Pottery. I was thinking also, like, I don't know if, not to interrupt an anime cutscene, but maybe part of it too, like, I don't know if this is a separate thought or something that's related, but it occurred to me thinking about robbing humanity of their free will, like they were talking about. There's an interesting kind of inversion of what you get in a lot of, like, religious theory, where, let me see if I can put this in the right direction. Religion, like one religious thought is that, like, sin is like a consequence of free will, and free will that's given to humanity is like the important thing that, like, makes human activity possible and also creates, like, you know, the ability for humanity to fall from the garden or grace or however you want to identify it. Here it seems like the roles of those with respect to each other are almost reversed, where the party seems to be saying that, like, sin and those negative emotions are a prerequisite for free will. So take away the ability to feel negative emotions, you also take away people's free will. So I don't know if that's like another way into thinking about how people cope with, like, deficits in their body and corruptions of their agency, or if it's just a separate thought. Yeah, and especially when you put it that way, Pottery, in terms of, like, acknowledging and leaning into their disfigurements, I feel like thinking about the sin and free will relationship is another way of articulating that same thing. I feel like we're getting to the heart of it. We'll watch through this and then wrap things up for the evening. Next time we can call a save. Oh no! I think we're reaching the endgame. I can hear the Tower of Salvation crumbling. Oh, Jesus.
Hey, please, guys, let's not fight!
Yeah, it's like he completely lets it atrophy in contrast to the other characters who see it as a form of unique empowerment.
This is a domain?
Innominat's domain.
In exactly the same way as Artorias is now seeing, like, the negative aspects of human emotion as flaws that ought to atrophy rather than be embraced. So, yeah, different faces of the same theme.
Their wills have been stolen.
It's not been fully sealed away yet. Rokuro, give him a good smacking. Wake him up.
On it.
Aizen!
Got it. We'll put in at the nearest harbor. To Port Zexon!
Not the age of lifeless beings.
I feel like some jerk played tug of war with my brain.
Dig up some spirit. They're trying to strip away your will.
Oh no! Look, it's that merchant. You're all right.
I do not deserve to be all right.
Jesus. Is it me for real?
I used people, stepped on them just to make a profit. I even aided wanted criminals so that I could expand my business. My soul is black with ugliness and can never be forgiven.
No, wait! Stop!
The world needs to be purified of malevolence. I don't belong here. I have to die. I have to die. I have to die.
No, it's not right!
Oh.
You can die if you want, but saying you have to die is a good way to make my blood boil.
I mean, if anyone's gonna jump into the
Those
ocean.
awakened to their own malevolence seek to end their lives. Welcome to Artorias' uncompromising world of reason.
First they steal humanity's rudder, and now they want to say who lives and who dies?
We should find out what's happening here, unless you'd rather not see.
You're right. I wouldn't. But I won't hide from the truth any longer.
It's
Before
like,
anything else.
it's the purely sanitized logician's answer to like the question at the beginning of the myth of Sisyphus motivating Camus' inquiry. Like, how do we overcome like the compulsion to kill ourselves, and like what justifies our existence? Well, it's simple. Nothing. And that's the end of the story.
We'll need to confirm just how far his power reaches. Let's head to Logris.
No. To the seat of evil. My goodness.
So this is the result of their ceremony of suppression.
Seems that way. They've brought their peace to mankind.
Ugh. Well, we're going to have a brave new world to explore next time in more ways than one on the Friday stream. I joke, but it is kind of morbidly interesting to me to see what really an Age of Lifeless Beings you might imagine would look like, because of course we're able to see a teeny tiny microcosm of that in Welgaia the first time we go there in Tales of Symphonia, and we see the Angel Society, but seeing it in terms of something that is being enforced on a global scale with civilians who up until moments ago were acting otherwise is a whole other ball of wax, and a really interesting one. Things are definitely coming to a head. Oh my goodness. So many themes to dive into. It's such a joy to be able to think about all of the individual characters in terms of their journeys. That Aifread adventure was harrowing. Now to see it all come together in a way that honors those individual threads, but is also evidently bringing us some insights into the themes that the game has been playing with all along on some higher levels, like we've been talking about in the last few minutes with these ideas of disfigurement and the embrace of the negative, and how that dovetails with the ideas of self-contradiction and mutual contradiction that we kicked off the stream with. What a pleasure. Nice to be back. It was a good birthday. It was a bad sickness, but it's good to be back in the saddle of things. Pottery, my friend, thank you for hanging out. Great talking this through and experiencing it with you. Hope to see you back on Friday. Pizzicato 5, thank you for dropping in, wishing me a happy birthday. It's always a pleasure to see you hanging out too. I hope you're continuing to enjoy these. We'll be back same time on Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, to see how much further into the climax, I think it's fair to say, of Tales of Berseria we can get. I am fully confident we will have plenty more to unpack. Probably more updates on the article drafting that is going on in the background as well. And who knows, if we're lucky, maybe some interesting further developments on Beyond the Dawn. I wouldn't rule it out. Bandai Namco always has something else fun up their sleeves. It's been a pleasure. Until then, my friends, think well, game well. I'll see you again real soon. I've been your host, Aaron Suduko. Check out With the Terrible Fate for plenty more food for thought on video game storytelling. I'll see you again real soon. Cheers.